Okay, looks like we're recording. And guys, I am so excited to have on the program Ronnie Lee. Ronnie Lee is the founder of the Animal Liberation Front, which, viewers of mine know that I've been taking an interest in. I've been talking to a lot of former ALF members. I guess, Ronnie, what I'll start with is just from a personal standpoint, me being an American, a lot of what I've learned about the Animal Liberation Front is about like the American ALF. So, um, reading about you and how you started it and everything, it's slightly different, the history in the UK and everything. But first of all, let me just welcome you to the program. It's such an honor to meet you.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. It's an honour for me to be able to take part. I'm very pleased that you invited me.
Yeah, yeah. I'll just say up front, I already told Ronnie this. I just read his biography. I highly recommend it. It's a very fascinating read. Takes us up to about 2017. So all this is really fresh in my mind. I actually just finished it like minutes ago. Yeah, it's a very, very exciting read. Why don't you take us back? Because, I know that the group started out as Band of Mercy, and maybe even go back further to when you were doing the Hunt Sav stuff.
It kind of goes back even further than that because um, uh, when Jon Hochschartner was writing my biography, it kind of asked me if there was anything in my younger life that indicated how I'd turn out to be, and that was the first time I thought about it. And in actual fact, there were quite a few incidents where I took action to protect our fellow animals. I We were at a what's called a safari park. It's like a kind of open zoo type place when I was about 12 years old, and we went out on a boat. I went out with other members of my family on a boat where a guy, there were seals in a lake, and a guy was throwing dead fishes into the water to track the seals so people could take photographs of them. And one of the seals was probably especially hungry and jumped in the boat and started grabbing fishes out of the bucket. And the guy hit this seal with a paddle, and I immediately had a go at the guy. Immediately verbally attacked him, and everyone else stayed quiet, and my parents were very embarrassed. And then when we got home, I phoned up the management of the safari park and demanded that they sack this guy for what he'd done. So that was an early incident, and then there's another incident where I stopped a guy beating his dog in the local park, even though this guy was a lot bigger and nastier than myself. That's just so there were quite a few things where I kind of I took action where a lot of other people wouldn't do. So I think there was something in me already. And but how I kind of started on my road, I suppose, to sort of towards the ALF was when I became vegetarian, and that was when I was 18, and that would have been in 1969. And it's through my sister. My sister started going out with a guy who was a vegetarian, and I was very curious about why he was, because I don't think I'd ever heard of anyone being a vegetarian before. Back in those days, it wasn't very common. And he said it was because he felt it was wrong for other animals to be killed for humans to eat, because we didn't need to do it. He'd been vegetarian since quite a young boy, and he was a very good athlete. He was very fit and healthy. And I was a huge meat eater. I was a really big meat eater, and so I tried to, in my own head, I tried to find excuses not to go vegetarian, but I kind of couldn't. And after about 3 days of considering it, I became vegetarian, and my sister did too, which was good because we were able to support each other.
Yeah.
And as far as I knew, I was doing my best. I wasn't aware of what happened to animals in the dairy industry and the egg industry. And then 2.5 years later, in 1972, I read an article in the Vegetarian Society's magazine written by somebody from the Vegan Society, and that explained the plight of the hens and the chicks and cows and calves. And I immediately resolved to become vegan, and I very quickly became vegan after that. And then I saw a news item on the television about the hunt saboteurs, and I immediately thought, right, I've got to get involved with those guys, because I was young, and I, wanted to be active and wanted to do more than just basically change my diet. So I got involved with hunt saboteurs. I started. I first of all joined my nearest group, which was probably about 20 miles away from me. But then I formed a local group of hunt saboteurs where I lived, and we used to go every Saturday. We used to go out and sabotage the local hunts, and then that was what led on to the Band of Mercy, because there was a form of hunting called cub. It's called cub hunting. It takes place early in the hunting season, but probably starting around about July and August is when this type of hunting starts. And basically, it's not even hunting; it's kind of slaughter. What they do is they send the hounds, the hunt dogs, into a wood just to massacre the young foxes, the fox cubs. And what they do is the adult foxes go out hunting at night, and they take the fox cubs with them to teach them how to hunt. And the members of the fox hunt block up the entrances to the fox earths. So when the foxes come back to the wood where they live, they can't go underground. And then what the hunt do is they send the dogs in, and basically just to massacre these young foxes, because that's to give the hounds, particularly the young hounds, a taste of blood and get them more fired up for hunting. And it was very difficult to do anything about that. We'd just stand around helpless because we'd be outnumbered by the members of the hunt. And the tactics of the hunt saboteurs are very much about disrupting the chase. Just, when the fox is being chased, pursued by the hounds, many of the tactics about disrupting the chase, and there was no chase, you see, so it's very, very difficult. And then I started thinking, what can we do about this? And together with some other people, we came up with the idea, well, let's go to the hunt headquarters, the kennels where they keep the dogs, in the early hours of the morning before a hunt, and damage their vehicles so they can't go out and do this cub hunting in the first place. So, but we couldn't do that as the hunt saboteurs, because the hunt saboteurs tried to keep within the law. So we had we got together, 6 of us, and we had a meeting in London. It was in a basement cafe. We were huddled in the corner of this basement cafe, talking quietly about our plans. And we decided to call ourselves the Band of Mercy, which seems like a somewhat strange name, but it actually was. There were some RSPCA youth groups back in the 19th century, in the earlier days of the RSPCA, that called themselves the Band of Mercy, the Bands of Mercy. And some of them, I'd read something about some of these groups taking direct action. I mean, there was one group that damaged some guns that were going to be used to shoot animals. And I thought, yeah, it'd be great. That's a good name. We can revive the spirit of those groups and call ourselves the Band of Mercy. And that's what we did. And we started off by going to the hunt kennels and causing damage to their vehicles to stop them going out hunting. And then we progressed. We found out about an animal research laboratory that was being built, was under construction, where they were intending to do radiation experiments on animals. And a couple of us decided, right, we'll try and destroy this place before it's built. So we kind of attacked this place twice while it was in the process of construction and tried to burn it down. And we waited for the workforce to leave, and went inside and had a look around, made sure nobody was there, and twice we set fire to the place. We used petrol or gasoline to start a fire. And sadly, it wasn't destroyed. It was badly damaged, and the opening of the place was delayed because of what we did. And then a couple of us caused considerable damage to 2 boats that were going to be used for hunting baby seals. This was on a place called the Wash, which is on the kind of sort of eastern coast of England, where there were there's a colony of seals, and in the summer that's when they, the young seals, that's when the baby seals are born, and these characters would go and shoot them, to sell their to sell their fur. And as a result of our action, we destroyed one boat and badly damaged the other, and neither could be used. As a result of that killing of seals never happened again. Now, it was every year, and it never happened again after that.
Amazing, yeah.
So that was, and then we went on to, somebody was a sympathizer, sent us a list of places. It was somebody that worked in a scientific place. He wasn't involved in animal experiments, but the place where he worked got sent this list of places that bred animals for experiments, and he sent it to us. So we used it as a kind of hit list, and these places were easy targets because they had hardly any security, or some had no security at all. Because back in the day, security, because in the digital age it's very cheap to have surveillance cameras and alarms and all this stuff. Back in those days, it wasn't so easy. So a lot of places, their kind of their main form of security was just a lock on the door. That was all it was. So they were easy targets, but we often damaged their vehicles. These were the vehicles used to transport the animals to the laboratories. So we carried out attacks on quite a few of those places. Then a couple of us got arrested, and we ended up being sentenced to 3 years in prison. That was in 70. We were arrested in 74 and sentenced in 75. And because we'd never been in prison before, we reached release after a year. So we were released in 1976. And that was when the ALF was formed, because when I was in prison, I was very worried that was the end of that sort of action, because I thought the fact that myself and the other guy had been put in prison would deter other people from wanting to do the same thing as we'd done. But it didn't. It kind of seemed to act as an encouragement. And I had a lot of people come up to me, mainly young people involved in hunt SABs, asking me how they could get involved in that type of direct action. But a lot of people weren't really happy with the name of the Band of Mercy, because it sounded rather like a religious organization, and it didn't say what it was about. It didn't mention animals. So we decided to change the name to the Animal Liberation Front to say what it really was all about. And so the name was changed in the summer of 1976. And we kind of carried on before. We carried on as we had before with the direct action, but now, as well as causing damage to places, we were able to actually rescue animals, because there were more of us, and you need more. If you're doing an animal rescue, you generally need more people involved in the raid, and so we were now able to rescue animals from places, as well as causing damage. And I was sent to prison again in 1977 for a raid on a place that bred mice for experiments. And then I became the press officer for the Animal Liberation Front, because I become quite well known to the media, having been in prison twice. And they were always contacting me for comments about ALF action. So I decided, okay, well, look, I'll kind of take this on as a sort of official in an official capacity. It was voluntary. I wasn't paid for it or anything, but so I advertised the fact that the media could contact me if they wanted comments, and so I did that job for quite a number of years, and then in 1986, I was arrested together with I think probably about a dozen other people, and we were all charged with conspiracy in connection with the Animal Liberation Front activities. And as a result of that, in 1987, we had a long trial in 1987, and I ended up being sentenced to 10 years in prison.
Wow. So I was born in 84, just for some context. So all this, a lot of what you were describing just happened before my parents had even met. You know, some things in your background going kind of all the way back stand out to me. First of all, the two incidences that you brought up where you confronted people. There was also this other one described in your book where your buddy was shooting at some birds with like this thing. Yeah, maybe.
That's right. A friend of mine, I was at his house, and we were out in the yard, and we had kind of air guns, and we were shooting at cans, and then we ran out of ammunition, and then some birds landed, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to get some more ammunition, and I'm going to shoot those birds." And while he was away, I just chased the birds. I chased the birds away because I thought, no, I'm not going to let him do that. You know.
Yeah. Which, you know, I that one stuck out to me because I was like, you were about 9 years old, I think it was described in the book. And you essentially,
yeah, I was pretty young. Yeah.
you essentially did a hunt sab right there. It's
I
kind of interesting.
kind of did in a way. Yeah. So there was something in me to take action to protect animals where most people wouldn't.
Right.
And the I mean, the incident of the guy beating his dog was like particularly interesting because I threatened the guy, and I threatened him.
Yeah.
And he was very angry and was shaking from head to foot. And I went home and I told my mum about it. And this guy was known. He was the caretaker of a local school, and he was known as a nasty character. And anyway, the next day, my mum went out. She went out shopping, and when she came home, she pulled me aside and said, "That guy, the caretaker that you threatened, he's dead. That night he died of a heart attack."
Yeah.
So whether that was anything to do, I kind of like to think that might have been something to do with me threatening him. But I don't know.
You said, well, served him right. Man, so I mean, it's very interesting that you had this confrontational personality, at least when it came to animals. I guess, you know, it's described a few times too, where you were kind of picked on for your size. You know, like there's a lot of photos in there where you're pretty slight.
I'm only a little, and I was smaller then because I was quite a lot slimmer, a lot thinner. I was always very slight, but it didn't really stop me. I'd kind of go in where others would fear to tread.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you think like that time when there was a bully picking on you, I think you just punched him?
Yeah, I punched. We were. I was playing a game. I don't know whether you have it in the USA. It's called Conkers. It's where it's horse chestnuts, and they're kind of they're tied on a string, and you take turns to hit the other person's. They're called conkers, to hit the other person's conker with your conker, and it's you know, if you break the other guy's conker, the other person's conker, then you win that competition, and you kind of carry on, and then you become the champion. Your conker like becomes the champion one that's broken all these other people. And in the school playground, we were having a game. A few of us were having a game of conkers, and this guy came up, and I think I was doing quite well, so my conker was pretty good. And this big guy came up and tried to snatch it off me, and I just swung. I mean, I was frightened, but I just swung at him and pretty much knocked him out.
Yeah.
And he complained to the teacher and went crying to the teacher when we had our first class after this break, and she didn't believe him. She said, "There's no
Mhm.
way I'm believing you that little Ronnie knocked you out, knocked you down." He said, "No, stop lying to me." But it was actually
Yeah.
true. It was actually
Mhm.
true. So I wasn't sort of put up with that. Even though I was a lot smaller than this guy, I wasn't going to put up with him doing that.
Yeah. Um, are you able to identify, I don't think you can maybe, but, like, what is it about animals that, really fired you up?
I think it's because I I I see them to be in need of protection, and I see that people who pick on them and harm them and exploit them, oppress them, I probably see them kind of as bullies in a sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
That they pick on those that are weaker, and I mean, animals aren't necessarily weak. A lot of animals, in many ways, are much physically stronger than humans.
Yeah.
And when we've seen bulls, there's been a few instances lately. I've seen the videos where bulls have actually killed and injured the bullfighters.
Mhm.
But in
Mhm.
terms of the like kind of mental capacity and finding ways of kind of doing harm and killing and oppressing, humans are far, you know, have a massive advantage over other animals in that sense, which
Mhm.
enables that oppression to take place. And I've just, it's defending those who have great difficulty in defending themselves against the kind of um, the ability of humans to oppress them. I think that's what motivates me. I'm kind of motivated by anger, really.
Mm.
Not that I go around these days. I, I don't go around ranting and raving and shouting, but I think there's an anger inside me at how humans oppress other animals, and that's kind of that's what drives me.
Yeah, yeah. I guess, I guess, anybody who's done, like, direct action, be it ALF or with the someone else, could point to different things, but I think that, um, anger, like, the first time you see something terrible happening to animals, very natural reaction is anger, and you don't know where to channel that, and perhaps it's into some direct action.
Yeah, I think there's various channels for that. I mean, I channel it differently these days than I did back then. Um, but it's a driving force. It's a source. It's a source of energy. A source of
Mm,
energy, and it's a very strong source of energy. I mean, compassion, in other words, putting oneself in the place of the animal and feeling the pain of that animal and being upset over what happens to the animals. Obviously, that's understandable, and we all feel that. But that isn't as powerful as a fuel as anger. I don't think
mm, mm.
it
You know
hasn't got that. It hasn't got that strength as a fuel, and I think where I've known people that became so upset over what happens to the animals and focus so much on that, it kind of debilitates them. It actually more or less prevents them from doing anything.
yeah.
You know, I've known people like that who they've more done rescue and that kind of thing. They're more drawn to that, which is very valuable, of course, in
Mm,
itself. But I think because I'm more motivated by anger. I think that's why I'm motivated to campaign, why I was motivated to take direct action, and why I'm still a campaigner these days, although in a different way.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, you've stayed active all these years, so you've, I watched, part of your recent talk with Roger Yates, that you had just the other day, where you guys were talking about how so many people have dropped out of the movement, and you guys
Yeah,
have managed to stay in. I'll link to that, by the way, because that was a cool discussion, which I still need to finish. But I kind of want to mellow on anger a little bit more because anger can be such a destructive force.
mm,
And the ALF, uh, as the need for a press officer, has to be explained that this is no a well thought out ideology. So it may be the case that sometimes ALF members or direct action people have acted impulsively, but it is well thought out. It's like a channeled anger, like and I wonder if
Yeah.
you could ruminate on how to use anger in a positive way. Maybe a little
I
bit.
think what you have to do is use anger as a fuel, but not be controlled by it.
Mm,
You see, that's and you see people kind of controlled by anger. You see people kind of ranting and raving and shouting, and it doesn't achieve anything apart from upset those people themselves and make them feel ill. And I can totally understand those people feeling angry, but I think it's important to use anger as a fuel, but to use it as a fuel to drive you to take action where you've thought rationally and calmly about what you're trying to achieve.
mhm,
And the ALF had I mean, there was a lot of naivety about the ALF and what we could actually achieve. But there was a rationale to it. There was a thought out strategy, and it kind of was a strategy that did change over the years. When we first started, it was very much about prevention. We're going to prevent, these particular people from going out and harming, oppressing, killing other animals. And basically, so when we used to go to the hunt kennels and damage the vehicles, first of all, we would do only quite minor damage. We would do enough damage to their vehicles that would actually prevent them. We'd just immobilize them in some way
mhm,
or another. We'd kind of maybe slash the tires. We'd put tacks and glue in the ignition, or we'd do that to the door locks, and we'd do these kind of fairly minor things. We wouldn't like completely destroy the vehicle.
mhm, mhm.
And it was like sort of minimum damage to achieve what we were looking at, looking to achieve. But later on, the idea evolved really of economic sabotage, and that was rather than do minimum damage, that we try to do maximum damage to actually put these places out of business.
Mhm.
So they suffer so much financial loss that they can't operate, or they find it difficult to operate.
Yeah.
So that changed, that thinking changed as time went on.
Yeah. Yeah.
It became the idea of economic sabotage, and it kind of did work. I mean, there were places that closed down because of just sustained, because there'd been a sustained series of attacks on a particular establishment, for instance, or so much damage caused to it. And it came particularly to the fore in the ALF's campaign um, against the fur trade, the fur industry, where there was a campaign of just causing damage to the high street fur stores, but also to big department stores that had fur departments. And the idea was just to try to cause maximum damage to those places so that they would no longer, well, you'd have to put the high street fur stores completely out of business, because all they did was sell fur. And
Mhm.
that's what actually in the end happened. And with the department stores, what we wanted was them to remove their fur department and to no longer sell furs in that store. We weren't aiming to totally close the store.
Mhm.
And that was highly successful as well. And this idea of causing, a huge amount of damage to these places. So they decide, well, it's just not worthwhile us having a fur department, because it has cost us so much money, or we now have to pay so much more money for insurance, for instance.
Mhm.
And that idea of economic sabotage worked really well against the fur industry.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost like sounds like, there was kind of a shift from like defense to offense in a way. Like one, you guys were having some success, so I'm sure you were gaining in confidence. But there's also these incidents where you've described, and I wonder how you feel about like a lot of times you describe where the hunt sabs would, they'd get attacked, they'd curl up in a ball, just take the beating.
Yes.
And yeah. So what do you think about that? Because in
We
some ways it's like a go ahead.
we when I was involved in the what happened was when after I think after I came out of prison, I think the first after I came out of prison from my first sentence, I moved to London, and I eventually got involved in the hunt saboteur group in North London. And we sort of rejected that policy. We said if we're attacked, we're going to fight back. We're not going to curl up in a ball and let these characters kick us.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to fight back. We're not going to start a fight, but if they attack us, we're going to fight back. And that's what we did. And strangely enough, because that was our policy, we got shunned by a lot of the other hunt sabs groups. In other words, now and again the hunt sabs would organise something called a joint hit, where they'd encourage the sab groups from all over the country to converge on one particular hunt. It might have been where there'd been a particularly nasty incident caused by that hunt. It might have been violence, or it'd been where they'd been killing a lot of foxes or something like that. And so there'd be these joint hits where I suppose the kind of central leadership of the hunt sabs would invite all lots of sab groups, come along and we'll all converge on this hunt. And we were told that we weren't welcome, not to come, not to go to these things, because we rejected that idea of just curling up in a ball.
Mm-hmm.
No, but you see, I think that I think that all hunt saboteurs should train in self-defense, because I think you've got a situation in hunts. They've always been violent, and they're still violent, and you get sabs sometimes seriously injured, and you get people going out and hunt sabs who've got no idea whatsoever on how to defend themselves, like lambs to the slaughter. And I think it would be better to have fewer sabs, but the sabs that there were trained in martial arts, were trained in other forms of self-defense.
Yeah,
I think that, I'd love to see the sab, because people are just being. I mean, we used to have people come out and hunt sabs that were just college students, for instance, and they didn't know they didn't know what they were doing at all, what they were doing, and sometimes they did more harm than good, and they were lambs to the slaughter to these violent hunt characters.
Yeah.
So I really do think that sabs should have some kind of system of people training in self-defense.
Yeah. There's this group that was formed to like battle the hunt sabs, is described, and then you guys had this group of karate experts come along.
There was one hunt that was just to the north of London. It was our nearest hunt, and the guy that the master of the hunt was a well-known television celebrity. He was a commentator on show jumping, this guy, and he employed employed some thugs to defend the hunts, and they would come and there was one week where for some reason I wasn't able to go out sabbing that particular week, but that particular Saturday. But what happened that Saturday was this the hunt, these so-called hunt defenders.
Yeah, hunt protection squad, they were called.
Hunt protection squad. That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
They attacked the sabs and roughed them up. So one of the guys that ran the sab group had friends who were in a karate club. They were karate experts, so he got them to come. I mean, they didn't like hunting, but they weren't enthusiastic enough to go out sabbing regular or anything. But he persuaded them to come out the next time we went out, and this hunt, this hunt protection group, they attacked our cars when we came to a halt at the hunt, and immediately these karate guys got out and gave them all a battering and kicked them, and chopped them around, and they all ran. All the hunt guys just ran away. But unfortunately, that we weren't able to get those guys every single time, because they weren't that enthusiastic. But say we had been trained like that, it would have been a different story.
Right. Yeah. That whole scene is fascinating. It sounds like a movie almost.
Yeah.
Well,
It was really amusing, because I was a spectator, because they didn't get as far as attacking the vehicle that I was in. They attacked the two in front of me, and they got such a battering that they ran away before they attacked the car that I was in.
You can like turn on the radio, some kung fu song or something.
Yeah, that's
Everybody's
right. You're kung fu fighting. Yeah. Yeah. It would have been a good soundtrack, to be honest.
Yeah.
It was great. I mean, they were just. I mean, they were really good, these guys, the karate guys. I mean, I think some of them were black belts. They were very good.
Interesting. Well, this tension that you describe between it seems like it's been a theme between the groups, and we don't want this in our group, so you guys go over here and do that, and we disown this action or that action. Seems like it's been such a theme throughout your activism life, and one thing that I really respect, as your story is told, is that you always, whenever asked about these other groups who may be doing some certain action, you always brought it back to the animals. Like it's described all the time. They would ask you, what about this group that did this? What about that group that did that? And you always try to refocus it back to the animal being abused.
Well, that's right. Yeah, because that's, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And I think there's we mustn't lose sight of the extent of the oppression of our fellow animals. I mean, I did some calculations, a couple of weeks ago, to do with death and killing, and I worked out that every second, fewer than 5, throughout the world as a whole, fewer than 5 humans die. And that is from all causes. That's from being killed, but also from natural death, disease, and all these things. Fewer than 5. In the same period of time, every second, just for the food industry, about 50,000 of our fellow animals are killed. And that's just for food industry. So you could add on hunting, you could add on, adverse human impact on the environment, you could add on lots of other things to increase that number, and it's maybe as high as 100,000. And that's that's how terrible it is.
Yeah.
For our fellow animals, in terms of the oppression they suffer from our species.
Yeah. There's this website, vegancalculator.com, that has a live counter. Sometimes it's interesting. You could maybe I should have done that for this interview, where you start that counter, and then at the end you see how many animals died.
It's about it's about 50,000 a second. I worked out. It may be a bit more or less than that, but I can't. At one time I calculated it. Here in the UK, it's every year I think it's at least 8 billion other animals are killed for human consumption. In the USA, it's going to be a lot more than that. And mostly it's fishes. What we're talking about are fishes and other sea animals. And once again, people don't realize that, and maybe a lot of vegans don't even realize that 90% at least of the animals that are killed for human consumption are fishes and other sea animals. They're hugely the victims of oppression by humans.
Yeah, they often, you're right, they often get overlooked, I think, partly
because, and they're highly aware, highly sentient.
Right.
But because they're not furry and cuddly, that they get overlooked. They don't generate those same emotions.
Yeah, you can't see expressions. They're so different than us.
But how they're killed through trawling, and of course fish farming is another big thing. I think in the UK, I think half the fishes consumed by humans in the UK now are farmed, are from fish farms, and that's factory farming. It's factory farming of fishes, and they're in horrific conditions. And other fishes are caught and killed to feed those fishes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like it's a appalling situation.
Since we're talking about the ocean and stuff, I don't know, what's sort of the timeline of like when Paul Watson was forming Sea Shepherd and they were doing this direct action on the sea? How did that coincide with what you guys were doing with Band of Mercy, Hunt Sabs? I don't know the
Kind
timeline.
of I remember, I'm not sure when Sea Shepherd started, but Sea Shepherd came out of Greenpeace,
Right.
and I remember Greenpeace being active in the late 70s, because we had a meeting with them, with some of their people involved in running Greenpeace, because we wanted to send some people over to that was Norway, to try and sink some whaling boats, and they weren't really all that happy about it.
Oh, really?
Greenpeace. In
Yeah.
the end, it didn't work out. It didn't happen. But I think that was probably before Sea Shepherd arose. I think Sea Shepherd was formed a bit, and now of course that's changed again, because there's been another split, and now you've got the Paul Watson Foundation.
Right. Which kind of
So
goes back to that tension I was just talking about.
yeah, that's right, and you get split off. It's happened all the time through the history of the animal rights movement, or perhaps more broad terms, the animal protection movements. There's been these splits, throughout the history, for the last 100 years or so.
Yeah. Do you think these splits have been really damaging, or do you think it's like, it's fine, that you do your thing, we'll do our thing kind of thing?
I think it depends on the relationship between the groups that happens afterwards. If it's just that the people want to focus on different things, and it can be kind of amicable, then that's better. But quite often it's not. Quite often there's a lot of nastiness goes on with these things, and that's not that's not good,
Yeah.
because all these people that they care about the other animals. They care passionately. They want to end what's being done to the animals, end the oppression of our fellow animals. So they've all got the same thing in their hearts, and so even if you disagree with the like the methods, the tactics of someone that is campaigning for other animals, I think it's important to appreciate that their motivation comes from a good place, and to take that into consideration, and to kind of be respectful in disputes and disagreements for those people, to still be respectful and to appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, going back to your story, your early days, another thing that stands out to me that just kind of sets you apart, in my view, uh, was, you talked about this Hunt Sab group that was kind of 20 miles away, and then you formed this group closer to you. You had a lot of initiative to start, to lead, and a lot of people don't do that. They're kind of looking for who's
Yes,
going to run this.
I think it's a big problem in our movement, the
Yeah.
lack of instigators, because nothing happens unless someone organises it.
Yeah.
And if we're always waiting around for someone else to organise it, quite often it's not going to happen.
Mhm.
And I think that you've kind of got. I mean, I see this now. I mean, my main focus now is on vegan outreach, and I see this, within the kind of sort of vegan outreach movement, so to speak. That first of all, that there's a huge problem in that most vegans aren't activists. Most vegans aren't. They're just vegan in their personal life, and they don't go out and make an effort to educate other people, or they're not involved in any other form of activism for our fellow animals.
Mhm.
So that's the major problem. That's a huge problem. And then secondly, within the group of people who are active, um, there's far too few of those people are prepared to be organisers and instigators. There's a lot of them waiting around for someone else to do the organising. And so what we kind of need is people to step, to go up a step. We need the non-active vegans to become active, and we need activists to become organisers and instigators. Because
Yeah.
what happens with a lot of vegan outreach, you get things like, it's like the Cube of Truth, and there's another group called We the Free. That there are these groups, and they're mostly involved with showing videos and stuff like that. And I think I think all that's great, but they tend to mainly take action in the centre of big cities. Where it's to do with people that are shopping in the centre of big cities, mainly that are their audience. But very few of them actually live in those cities, and they certainly don't live in the centre of those cities.
Mm.
And so what I would say to them is it's great that you're doing that, but think as well, can you organise something? Can you instigate something to educate others to become vegan in the area where you actually live? Because there's going to be thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in the area where those activists live who aren't vegan. So there's people all around them who aren't vegan, and yet they're travelling sometimes a considerable distance somewhere else to do activism.
Yeah.
That's
Waste of resources, maybe.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying that we need more instigators, because nothing happens unless someone instigates it.
You also have
And
an advantage in your own community of, being part of that community. Like you already have
yeah,
that connection.
and I think it's a different sort of action. I mean, I'm involved. I am involved to some extent with We the Free, and join with others in our kind of local towns and the cities fairly nearby. I help with that, and that's great. But in my own local area, the type of activism I do is different. It's kind of holding stalls, holding stands at community events. It's delivering flyers to people's homes. It's that kind of thing. It's kind of probably more low key type of action that is more fits in more, with the local community.
Mhm. Have you thought about, I'm guessing you've had some thoughts about how to inspire people to organize more?
It's it's difficult. I mean, I try all the time to inspire people to organise more.
Mhm.
I think it's one of those things where I, I think people are nervous of the sort of responsibility of doing that. But it can be done in a really small way, in a really uncomplicated way. I mean, first of all, one thing I encourage people to do is like just do action, because there's action there's a lot of action that people can do just themselves.
Mhm.
Like leaving flyers in public places, and um, going into a library, putting them in relevant books where
Mhm.
somebody that reads the book might be the type of person that would be interested in veganism, would be interested in animal rights. Those everyone can kind of do these really small things, but they can make a big difference. I mean, I know people who've become vegan, become activists, because they picked up a flyer on public transport, found one on the seat, and
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
um, that has happened. That does happen. So it's about always being mindful about how we can spread the message, and also I don't know how possible it is in the USA, because I heard in some areas it's not, but here we can deliver flyers to people's homes. We can put them through the letterbox in the door and deliver them. I don't know whether that's possible in the USA. I don't know whether regulations are different. It may
I don't
vary.
even know myself, to be
No,
honest. I
no,
should
no.
know. Yeah.
I think it's something to do with the mailboxes belong to the mail company and not belonging to the
Oh, you
person.
know what? I do know the answer to this because having done like political campaigning and stuff, we were not allowed to put stuff in people's mailboxes, but you can hang up things on people's doors and stuff. You can
Yes.
push things, in the door crack, basically.
Yeah,
That's
that
a
kind of thing. So that would be that would be the way to do it, kind of over there.
yeah.
And certainly in public places, flyers can be left around, and
Hmm.
in waiting rooms and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that
And
still can be done to
and
some
you
extent.
talked about how a lot of these types of activism can be a very effective and also very low stress. You and Roger were talking about
Yeah,
that.
the low stress. You're not going to. Um, there are obviously vegans who are nervous about engaging with members of the public, nervous about
Yeah.
talking to them and that kind of thing. But you see, when I do the free actions, a lot of it involves people just holding signs, directing others to, you know, to watch the videos. So that doesn't involve engaging conversation, and the people needed to do that. When you're delivering the leaflets, putting leaflets around, then you're kind of, it's very rare that you'd have to be engaged in conversation while doing that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, uh, and then I suppose the other things, perhaps a kind of, slightly more complicated than that, would be, holding information, having information stands. And I tend to do that at sometimes on my own, sometimes with others, at kind of at community events, where there's local carnival, and they have, various organizations have maybe a marquee or something like that. And
Hmm.
that's what I've got. I've got a cheap gazebo that I use for that, and go and, have a have a stall there, promoting veganism.
Yeah.
And we're involved in my local vegan group. We're involved in our local sort of alliance of environmental groups,
Hmm.
and they put on a lot of events, and we're involved in. We're able to have a presence at their events because, of course, there's a huge environmental aspect to veganism as well, and
For
plus the
sure.
health aspect. We have stands at health events as well,
Hmm.
promoting healthy eating,
Yeah.
and that it's all ways that you can, because there's that connection. It means that you're able to have a presence at those events.
Hmm.
It opens the door to you to have a presence, and then once you're in there, you can talk to people about ethical veganism.
Yeah.
It's just getting
Well,
in there in the first place.
yeah, exactly. And I like your talking about the, like leaving flyers and books because it's just a good example of like thinking creatively, which is something that sort of marked your early career. I mean, that's one of the things
Mm.
that stands out to me about reading about this history is just people like really thinking outside the box. And to give some context, it seems like a lot of the stuff you guys were doing, if it hadn't been done before, at least wasn't been doing it, nobody was doing these kinds of things at the time. It sounds like you were
No,
kind of
no. I mean,
breaking
it
new ground.
hadn't really been done before. There was, there had been examples of direct action. Like
Right,
I spoke
right.
about the bands of mercy, and there had been some examples, even hunt sabotage, of people taking direct action against hunting, way
Mm-hmm.
back decades before.
Yeah.
But they'd be very, very brave people that would kind of sit in the road in front of the hunt or something. It'd be quite isolated. These isolated incidents. And the
Mm-hmm.
hunt saboteurs was, and they were doing it. They continued to do that in a much more organised way. Disrupting the hunts. But in terms of like an organised effort, the Band of Mercy and the ALF were, that was the first organisation to do that.
Hmm. Yeah. I sort of like to ruminate on fear a little bit because I feel like fear is kind of what drives and motivates most people and prevents people from doing things. It sounds like you had very little of that, or at least you had enough motivation that you overcame that. So it's
I think I
like,
overcame it. I think,
yeah,
my determined, I was so angry about what was being done to the animals,
yeah,
that it enabled me to overcome, you know, my fear, and to overcome, because it's also stepping outside of your comfort zone. It's doing something that most people don't do.
yeah.
It's doing something that you're not expected to do.
Right,
in
right.
everyday life, isn't it? So it's that,
Yeah.
it's kind of that as well. And I think there's a big drive in most people just to be the same as everyone else.
Mm,
I find that difficult to understand because that's horrible. Why would I want to be the same
right.
as everyone else?
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
people seem to. That's what they want, and I find that quite difficult to contemplate. Really, I
yeah,
suppose I've probably never been like that. That's why.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and there was just something to you. There was some secret formula that drove you to do these things. I mean, and you described some naivete on the part of activists back in the day, but there was
Yes.
also some clear-headedness to you also where you knew you'd get caught. It's described you knew it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there was there was a strategy about how are we going. It was called the Animal Liberation Front. So obviously the idea of it was to achieve animal liberation. And
Right.
we kind of had a strategy about how that would come about, which was basically economic sabotage. That's what it ended up being. So
Mm,
it came from just this kind of taking preventative action, where we would kind of stop these individual hunts from actually going out, to kill the foxes. And it evolved from that into being this big strategy about how we would actually achieve widespread animal liberation.
mhm, mhm.
From something small, it became something like really big and kind of really visionary, I suppose.
Right,
And it was
right.
through that, and basically we had the idea, right? Okay, we'll put an end to the fur industry, then we'll put an end to the vivisection industry, and then we'll take on the meat industry, and we'll put all these people out of business, and that'll be the end of it. I mean, that was naivety in the extreme, but that was it was a strategy. It was a kind of thought out strategy in a sense that we were kind of, it wasn't just hitting out without any kind of thought behind it. There was that idea behind it, even though it
Mhm,
was really unrealistic. That kind of was the idea.
mm, mm. What do you think,
Um,
um so I have a lot of friends who focus on the single issue pressure campaigning, whether it's taking on the fur industry, the foie gras industry, and I'm seeing them have success. Like the fur industry, they just got Vogue to go for free on foie gras Omni. So we had these real big wins. Credit to Coalition to Abolish the Fur Trade and Animal Activism Collective for sort of spearheading those efforts and Duck Alliance. But yeah. Do you think it is naive? Because I think some of my friends advocate that if we just focused on one industry at a time, kind of knocked them down like dominoes. But I've never seen the movement do that because even in the ALF, they were focusing on, labs and the fur industry and rescuing chickens from battery cages and that sort of
mm.
thing.
Yeah, there was. I mean, the local groups within the ALF were just free to do whatever they wanted. So
Right, right.
they whatever sort of took their fancy in terms of. I mean, basically, we would be going around, we'd see a place and think, right, that's the target. Let's plan to attack that place. And it could have been a laboratory. It could have been a place that made traps for trapping other animals, or it could have been a intensive chicken farm where we would aim to attack the offices, for
Mhm,
instance. It was kind of very scattergun in that sense. Some of it was more focused. There were groups that would repeatedly attack the same target and then put that place out of business, and that happened with some some of the places that bred animals for laboratories, and even some laboratories themselves were put out of business through, constantly being attacked. And because it's harder the second time, because after the place is attacked first, then they'll increase their security,
mm,
and so
mm,
you have to be more and more clever. And a lot of the thinking, a lot of the planning with ALF actions wasn't actually how to do the action, but how to get away afterwards.
mhm,
It was
mhm,
often more thought had to be put into how to get away and how not to be caught than actually, you know, breaking into the place or whatever.
mm.
And that's where it's become increasingly difficult, particularly in the UK, because of surveillance. so much surveillance, so many cameras everywhere. They can trace a car journey from one end of the country to the other. So it's really hard to do stuff and get away with it. It's particularly the kind of serious stuff that we're involved in.
Yeah, it's interesting reading this history with the context of, knowing, what's happened in the last 30, 40 years or so.
Mm.
Because yeah, when you described like burning that one place, like right at the very beginning, um, it almost sounds like slapped together, like, and I'm guessing like
Yeah,
one of the reasons. Sorry, go ahead.
we'd have
Yeah.
almost certainly been arrested a few days after that.
Mm,
I mean, we were never arrested for that. What happened? We were caught doing something else, and they kind of um, they found, when they searched our car and when they searched our homes, they found evidence of other things.
mhm,
But we weren't actually ever arrested specifically for that event. But these days we would be, because they would use the cameras on the roads to trace our vehicle and all that
mhm.
kind of thing.
Yeah,
And the
yeah,
place itself would probably already even have security cameras on there, even though it was under construction.
yeah. It's a very different
That's
world.
what be. Yeah, it's very very different. But going back to the single issue things, I
Mhm,
think in terms of in terms of reducing the oppression of our fellow animals, I think that there is some value in single issue campaigns, but I think that quite often what happens is they move the problem around rather than solving it.
mm,
And a big example of that is the famous Shack campaign, a campaign against Huntington Life Sciences, which is probably the biggest example of what would be called a pressure campaign.
mhm, mhm.
And of course, what happened was that campaign actually failed in its main objective, which was to close Huntington Life Sciences, which is still open to this day, under a different name now.
Right.
It's
Marshall,
called
I think.
Lab. It's called Lab Corp now. It's called Lab
Oh,
Corp, but it's gone through a couple of name changes since it was Huntington Life Sciences. It's still open
yeah, I
in
think,
the same place.
that's the Marshall Bioresources, right? Where we know about that in the
Marshall Bioresources, I think they supply Beagles to LabCorp. That's quite
yeah,
near. That's only a few miles away from LabCorp. It's MBR Acres was the Beagle breeding, where Camp Beagle is, where they're kind of, and in a sense that the camp there and the campaign there has actually kicked off a resurgence. Actually, I think that's been there about 4 years. Actually, did kick off resurgence in the anti-vivisection movement here in the UK.
yeah, yeah.
No, there's been a lot of disputes surrounding that camp and a lot of fallouts and stuff.
Mm,
But it has created that renewed vigor, some renewed vigor in the anti-vivisection movement here.
yeah,
But
yeah.
talking about the Shack campaign, you see, I mean, I wouldn't declare that campaign to be a complete failure, because I would look at, okay, so that campaign failed to close Huntington Life Sciences, but what was the impact of that campaign on the vivisection industry as a whole?
Mm,
Did that campaign result in a reduction in the number of animals oppressed by that industry? Or did it result in fewer of our fellow animals being used for vivisection than would otherwise have been the case? And to me, that's how you really would need to judge that campaign. And it might
mm,
well have been the case that there was some success in that area, but the target wasn't achieved. But you see, the problem is, say Huntington Life Sciences had been closed, say that campaign has succeeded, right? What would have happened, and unless at the same time you reduce the demand for animal experiments, all that will happen is the experiments that were being carried out by HLS would have been carried out by another contract testing laboratory, because HLS was a contract testing laboratory. In other words, and still is under its different name,
mm,
that basically companies pay them to test products, and often those tests are done on other animals, basically. So what would have happened is, with HLS no longer being there, they'd have just given their business to another laboratory. So the main gain from HLS closing wouldn't have been for the animals, wouldn't have been for the animal rights movement, wouldn't have been for the anti-vivisection movement. It would have been for other contract testing laboratories who would have taken the business that HLS had lost, you see.
Mm.
And so what happens then? You have to go and try and close another one down and another one down and another one down. And how long is that road?
Mm.
And that's the problem. And then you're dealing with an international industry. So is some of that testing then going to move abroad? And there's, and I think that's the problem. And so I don't see these campaigns and it's the same with MBR Acres, the campaign there to close that beagle breeding facility. For as long as there's a demand for beagles to be used in experiments, they're going to be supplied from somewhere. And if that place closes down and no beagles can be supplied from there, they'll be supplied from somewhere. They'll even be supplied by abroad. But we already have a situation where beagle dogs are flown in from abroad to supply laboratories in the UK. They don't just all come from MBR Acres. So that's the problem you face. It's like it's a kind of, in a sense, of what you kind of call a sort of false victory. Is it a Pyrrhic victory? Is that the word that's used? Where it appears to be a victory, but when you really analyse it, it's not a victory, or it's far less of a victory. You see, so I say that the main positivity about campaigns like that is the generalised pressure they put on the industry as a whole. Because the only way that you can assess like a victory in terms of animal experiments is, has your action succeeded in reducing the number of animal experiments, or has it succeeded in preventing those experiments being as many as otherwise would have been the case? That's the only way. And we've had a situation now, it'll be very interesting because every year over here, the figures for animal experiments get published by the government. And the previous 2 years, there's been a fall. The year before last, well, not last year. Last year's figures are going to be coming out later this month. But when we're looking at 2023 and 2022, there's been a fall. And in 2022, there was a fall of 10% in the number of animal experiments, a huge fall. Now, is this as a result of the pressure being applied by the reinvigorated anti-vivisection movement? Is that what's causing that? And if so, that's the victory. All right, somebody could say, well, some of those experiments might have moved abroad, but I would say not all of them have. I would say that either they're not being done or they're being replaced by non-animal methods because of the pressure, you see. And that's how you judge the victory. Don't judge it on individual places closing. The campaigns against these individual places are like pressure points. It's where you apply the pressure that then goes through the industry as a whole, and that's how I would judge the success of those campaigns. So they're not. I'd say they're not pointless campaigns, but how they succeed is different to probably most of the people involved in them look at it.
It's like it has to ripple through. Like I know what you're saying.
Otherwise, you're pushing the problem around. What you're doing is you're closing one place, and that results in another place getting more business, and it doesn't.
Not to use not to use a speciesist term, but it's like whack-a-mole, right? Could pop up.
That's it. And the other thing, if you have a campaign, let's stop experiments on dogs. All what happens, you stop experiments on dogs, they'll just use another type of animal instead. And there won't be any net gain for our fellow animals. And this is the thing, and this is what I'm talking about analysis. That the problem is we have a lack of analysis in the movement. We have, it is a highly emotional subject. What's happening to our fellow animals is horrific, and people are going to be upset. People are going to get angry. People are going to get emotional. But it's important to not let that cloud our ability to analyse what is actually happening and what the result of our actions is going to be. That's the difficulty. And I think what happens is people don't think enough about stuff because they're overcome by by emotion. Here's a place that's, you know, torturing animals. Here's a place that's breeding animals for laboratories. Let's go outside that place and let's shout and let's close it down. And I can understand that, you know, those emotions. I can understand that reaction. That's totally understandable. But when you sort of actually analyze it, it's kind of, it's not as simple as that. It's not as simple as that. That you kind of, if all you'll do is just move the problem around, you've got to look at it at a deeper level. And I've kind of become, I think as I've got older, I've kind of become more like that. I've become more thoughtful and analytical about the actual result of actions, what we're trying to achieve, how we actually achieve widespread animal liberation.
Yeah.
You know, and what, you know, what tactics, what strategy we need to use to do that.
Yeah, I guess the hope is that there's, well, I've only been in the movement for about going on 8 years now, so I have a very limited view. Um, Having looked back at, say, the Shack campaign and stuff, it does seem to have had that effect of galvanizing public opposition to vivisection, at least in the moment. Obviously, it also had that backfire effect of like a galvanized government response and that sort of thing.
This is the problem that we kind of, and it was where we were hugely naive in the ALF, you know, our idea that we could carry all before us and, you know, destroy all these places and put all these, you know, multi-billion pound industries out of business, you know, and to think that the state would kind of stand by and let us do that. I mean, that was
Is that
just
what you
naive.
thought? Yeah, in the
We
moment,
didn't even think. We just thought, well, because I think we got away with it in the beginning, because we thought that it took the authorities a while to catch up, because this was a new thing. No one
Yeah.
had been doing stuff like that, you know, for animals ever. And it took them a while to realise what was going on and to think about how do we tackle this.
Yeah.
And it became a big threat to, you know, these are very powerful industries. The vivisection industry, you know, the links to the pharmaceutical industry. These are very powerful businesses,
Yeah.
and that have huge that will have huge influence on the type of government that is prepared to be influenced by them. If you see what I mean. And all the governments we've ever had are the type of government that's been prepared to be influenced by, you know, by these industries.
Yeah.
And of course, that's what's happened. And of course, so in the end, they put in all sorts of measures to kind of repress the ALF in different ways. You know, harsher sentences, new laws, you know, using old laws in ways that they weren't meant to be used, special police squads, infiltrators, all sorts of stuff, you know, a whole array of different methods, you know, of stopping the ALF. And kind of in the end, they succeeded, really. I mean, the ALF still operates in the UK, but very, very small, you know, very few actions take place now. And mostly quite small things. I mean, in some other countries, I think the ALF is actually, ironically, more active than the UK, because they probably haven't got the sort of security measures and surveillance we have here. And so that's kind of that's what happened. But it was kind of bound to happen. It was just that we kind of didn't consider it. We didn't think that, you know, it didn't. You know, we knew what we were doing was illegal, and we knew that if we were arrested, you know, we would end up in prison. You know, we knew that.
Yeah.
But we didn't think much about the bigger, you know, so much about the bigger picture of the actual, that it would be more, the state's reaction would be more than that they would actually be proactive in bringing all these other measures to try and crush our movement.
Yeah.
But of course they're going to, aren't they? And we've seen this more recently, where there's been a lot in recent years, a lot of like direct action in connection with the climate crisis, and, you know, global heating, and, you know, organizations that have employed disruptive tactics. We've had Extinction Rebellion. We had a group called Just Stop Oil that were blocking the roads, and Insulate Britain was another one that taking direct action. And what that's resulted in is just the government bringing in more oppressive measures against protests, and they're still doing so. They're still, and now that's happening in relation to protesters regarding Palestine. They're bringing in all these measures to curb and curtail protest all the time. And so the main result of like what protesters be doing isn't to achieve their aim, but is to cause the government to bring in harsher measures to repress protests. That's really been, sadly, the main result of it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have in the States, for instance, I have because I follow the press office, Jerry Vlasic's press office, and then there does seem to have like a small uptick in sort of ALF style actions of mink liberations and that sort of thing. It's been sort of interesting to see. I have a question for you. I've interviewed Peter Young and Rod Coronado, and I interviewed Tom Harris, and for all these guys like yourself who have served time, I always approach the interview not knowing, how reticent will these guys be to talk. And I wonder, you seem quite unconstrained, and all of them, they're like, we'll talk about anything. And I wonder, in the past, have you ever felt constrained because you were thrown in prison for incitement, I believe, right? Your third.
Yeah, it was one of the charges was inciting other people. Well, not just incitement, but conspiracy to incite other people. So it was like 2 steps removed from actually doing anything myself. I conspired to incite other people to do so.
Yeah, they'll have a third one thinking about conspiring to.
Yeah, thinking, we got together and thought, how can we incite someone to do something? So it's like, I mean, I quite openly admit at the time I was doing stuff, I was doing loads of stuff, and in the book I talk about that, and quite prepared to do that now. I've been in prison, I've done my time, and all that. But yeah, I'm quite happy to. The one thing I wouldn't do is obviously name people who haven't been arrested yet and stuff like that. I mean, there's some things that you kind of wouldn't talk about.
Right.
But you see, I think that it's kind of two fundamental things, I suppose, to say. And I mean, first of all, regarding the ALF, and secondly, regarding the sort of overall strategy of the movement. The first thing about the ALF, and I think that the problem with the ALF in like the name was on the tin, Animal Liberation Front. We were there to achieve animal liberation, when in fact we could never have done that using the methods we did. I mean, the ALF was successful in sparing millions of animals from slaughters and suffering, because during the height of the ALF's campaign against the vivisection industry, the number of annual experiments in the UK fell from over 6 million to 3 million. And it never and since then, over the years, it did increase to 4 million at one time. It's now fallen back to below 3 million. But the height of the mid-70s, the figures for animal experiments in the UK were higher than they'd ever been before, at over 6 million. And 10 years later, they were down to 3 million because of and there isn't any other reason. Nothing else was happening that would reduce the number of those experiments apart from the ALF. So that's millions of animals. The fur trade, at one time go back to the 1980s, every town, even really small towns, would have a fur store, high street fur store. In the bigger cities, the suburbs of the cities would have fur stores. Where I lived at one time in North London, just in a side street, just around the corner from me, there was a fur store, which mysteriously had the windows broken on many occasions. I don't know how that happens, but there we are. It's just around the corner from me in a little street.
I don't know. Yeah.
And yeah, I was very pleased every time I saw somebody had broken the window. Um, and you know, in a lot of the cities, there were department stores that had fur departments selling the full fur coat and everything. Right
Yeah.
now, after there's been no legislation in the UK to ban the sale of fur. There was legislation brought in, I think, in the early 2000s
Hmm.
to ban fur farming. So fur farming's banned, but fur can still be imported from abroad. But the only department store that has a fur department is Harrods in London, and the only high street fur stores, there's just a few of them, just in one part of London. That there are none in any other cities or any other towns. And I
Wow.
say that
Really?
is largely to do. There were other campaigns against, you know, the wearing of fur and the, you know, manufacture of fur garments. But, you know, I think the evidence shows really that it was largely through the ALF.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you think of the number of animals that have been, and of course people might argue, well, somebody might buy a leather coat instead of a fur coat, and yeah, you know, that could be the case. But I think, nevertheless, the result of that campaign was the sparing of millions of animals, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
from slaughter and suffering. So the ALF achieved, you know, the
Enormous.
ALF achieved a huge amount, but nevertheless, compared with the extent, you know, like I mentioned earlier, 50,000 of our fellow animals a second slaughtered for human consumption, you know, for food, when it's totally unnecessary. We can all, you know, live on a vegan diet.
Yeah.
Compared with that, what the ALF actually achieved was like, and also you got to take into account the ALF in other countries, and those groups would have spared large numbers of animals. But even adding all that, it's a drop in the ocean compared with the totality
Hmm.
of the
Hmm.
oppression of our fellow animals by humans. So
Yeah.
how do we actually achieve animal? And I think the problem is that the ALF was engaged in a direct war against the people that directly oppress the animals, against the businesses and the industries that
Hmm. Hmm.
directly oppress the animals. We had no dialogue with ordinary people, no dialogue with ordinary people at all. And and the question to ask is, how are we going to achieve animal liberation while the mass majority of ordinary people don't believe in it? How is that going to be possible in our society to achieve that?
Hmm.
And it, you know, realistically, it isn't. It's not going to be possible. So unless we change the mindset of a large number of ordinary people,
Hmm. Hmm.
how are we going to achieve animal liberation? You see,
Yeah.
and this is why I very much believe these days in vegan education, because that's the way of changing, you know, how people think, how they view our fellow animals, you know, their attitudes, their
Hmm.
behaviour, and their voting patterns, and who becomes politicians. Because the other thing, what we've never thought of, yeah, as a movement, we have always looked at as well as like trying to putting pressure on business and trying to get business to change, and as the ALF did, and as pressure campaigns do. Uh, the other area of trying to exert pressure is on governments. You know, we want laws to ban this and laws to ban that, and there's all this lobbying, all this pressure, all this campaigning on government. And here in the UK, what have we ever had from that? I mean, as I mentioned, we had the ban on fur farming, but fur can still be imported into the country.
Hmm.
There's a so-called ban on hunting, but the hunts get round it. It's quite weak legislation that isn't really enforced. I'm just trying to think of what else we've achieved after these decades and decades of campaigning. The campaign against hunting has been going at least 80 years
Hmm.
in this country, you know,
Yeah.
decades and decades. And so, in compared with the totality of the oppression of our fellow animals, what's been achieved by all this pressure,
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
campaigning towards government, is tiny. And so, instead of thinking about how do we put pressure on these highly resistant people, right, we need to replace them. We need to be the ones in charge, because while people are in charge who are speciesist, while they have such little consideration for our fellow animals, while they're human supremacists, how are we ever going to get anything out of government? We're not. They're just tiny, tiny concessions that have taken years to achieve. We have to start thinking about how can we be the ones in charge? What process do we need to go through? What process do we need to instigate in order to achieve that? First of all, we need to be the politicians, and we need to be the people that vote those politicians into office, right?
Yeah.
And you see, the more vegans you create, the more vegan politicians you have, because some of those people will want to be. I mean, I know vegans that are in politics. I mean, the leader of the Green Party has been recently elected over here and has become highly, highly popular. He's been vegan for 10 years, and he's
Oh,
vegan
wow.
for
That's
animal.
great.
He's vegan for animal rights,
Wow.
and they're gaining hugely in popularity because, of course, the Labour Party, that government, have massively lost popularity. And there's a huge threat from a right-wing party called Reform UK, who are leading in the polls and who'd be absolutely disastrous for our fellow animals if they were elected. They would legalise hunting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got involved in the Green Party, I know.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not so much involved in the Green Party as I was, because I'm very much focused on vegan outreach. But I became involved in the Green Party because I saw that the Green Party is as a kind of vehicle, and I think probably they still are, that because obviously a government is formed by a political party. It's formed through a coalition of parties. And I saw the Green Party probably as the best hope of a party that would bring in strong animal protection measures, because they had the best policies on animal protection and also the best policies on the environment. And to me, the environment is an animal rights issue, is an animal liberation issue, because that's about the natural world where, free living beings live, and adverse human impact on the natural world is responsible for horrendous slaughter and suffering of our fellow animals. So I saw the Green Party as the kind of vehicle by which we kind of achieve this change in legislation. And when I was involved in the Green Party, I was involved in setting up an organisation within the Green Party called Greens for Animal Protection, which was about, first of all, informing the public about or the animal rights movement, perhaps more specifically, about the Green Party's positive policies for animals and increasing the membership of the Green, getting more of those people in the Green Party. But secondly, trying to educate people within the Green Party, to try and persuade those people to become vegan. We'd have stalls at the Green Party conferences where we'd give leaflets to party members about veganism, for instance. And that group's still going. I'm not really involved in that group anymore, but other people are still that group's still going. And the other thing that we did was to improve policy. We bring in stronger policies for animal protection as well, and they're still doing that. So I'm very pleased to have kind of started that within the Green Party, although I'm not so much involved in it now, because I started looking at it at an even deeper level. I started saying, well, even if we get more support for the Green Party, and they're still very human focused. They're still they've got all these good policies on our fellow animals, on animal protection, and a lot of them are abolitionists. Where they want to actually ban things, rather than just welfare. Although that's great, they don't really give those policies any sort of priority.
Right.
Their priority is human issues, and their social justice stance is really, really good. I mean, they're really good on human issues. But nevertheless, as I said, the most serious issue of all, in the history of this planet, by a million miles, is like the oppression of our fellow animals, humans. That's the number one issue. And it's like, I kind of think of it in a sense like, the film The Matrix, where The Matrix was really a film about false reality. It was about false consciousness, I thought, where everyone was getting on with their everyday life and the normal things, sad things, happy things. When there was actually a horrific reality going on all underneath all that people weren't aware of, or most of them weren't aware of, didn't think about. And to me, that's kind of, I call it a suprematrix, because it's to do with human supremacy, in that everyone's getting on. There's all these human issues going on, and big news about human issues, and some terrible things happening that are very serious, and obviously need to be addressed. While all the time there's this horrendous, by a million billion times more horrendous in terms of the slaughter and suffering going on that humans, our species, has imposed on other animals. And it's kind of, and most humans are blind to that. Most humans either don't see it or don't want to see it. And it's like the Matrix. There's this horror going on that everyone's oblivious to. And that's what, that, because we've imposed that, because we're like a sort of Nazi species. Not that every human is, because there are humans that fight for our fellow animals. There's the humans that care deeply about what happens to other animals. But as a whole, the impact of our species as a whole, we're like, our jackboots are everywhere on the earth, aren't they? How we've oppressed other animals, invaded their territories, exploited them, imprisoned them, destroyed them, and and that is like, that has to be the number one priority in politics, as far as I'm concerned. And that is never going to be the number one priority until we have massively more vegan influence in politics. We only get that through creating more vegans, because that's where politicians come from, the right ones, and those are the people that can vote those politicians into office. So if we are going to take over, and unless we become the ones in charge, so to speak, it's going to be the species. It's going to be the human supremacists that are in charge. It's either one or the other. There isn't. Sadly, there isn't a third option to that. There isn't a third option. So we have to go. We have to devote a strategy. What's our strategy for like taking over? And it has to be, we have to educate more people to become vegan, according to what veganism really means, which is a philosophy. The focus of veganism, opposition to the exploitation by humans of other animals. That's the focus. The scope of it is more than that, but that's the focus.
Yeah. Looking at the state, the animals are woefully underrepresented in government. I think there's Cory Booker, who's a vegan. Adam Schiff there's like a handful, maybe 5 or so vegans.
But even they will concentrate mainly on human issues.
Exactly.
I mean, Zach Lansky, his speech at the Green Party conference, excellent speech in terms of, social justice for humans. Our fellow animals weren't mentioned. I mean, obviously environmental protections, which he's very much in favour of, probably combating the climate crisis, all that will hugely help our fellow animals, but they weren't directly mentioned. They weren't directly mentioned because it's all about humans, and if they did get into power, yes, I think there would be measures brought in to, animal protection measures brought in, but I think they would be few and far between compared with the legislation regarding humans.
I have our most prominent, I would say, is Cory Booker, since he's a U.S. senator, and that's the smaller of our government branches. So he's more prominent. He also raised his profile recently when he gave this really long speech on the floor in protest of what was going on. So I'm kind of hopeful that he could be a potential presidential candidate. I'm not under any kind of illusion that would be a game changer were he to become president, but it would certainly be a step in the right direction. But I'm not someone who's like very critical of the larger orgs. They help us out a lot. Like the grassroots activists tend to get some help from these groups. I know other people are going to disagree with me on that, sorry, go ahead.
I just think, I mean, we have the same here. I think that we have various, national organizations here. And then you've got kind of globalized organisations now, haven't you as well? You know,
Yeah.
a lot of these organisations are global. I mean, for instance, Anonymous Voices is they're global, aren't they? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
but in terms of like our national organisations, I'm kind of I am critical of some of the things they do, but I think what I'm always careful of, and it's really with not just with organisations, but with people as individuals, is kind of not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, to be
Hmm.
even-handed in criticism, to say,
Yeah.
okay, they did this one thing that I didn't agree with, but they also do lots of other good stuff.
Right.
If you
Right.
see what I mean, rather than just saying they did this one thing I don't agree with, therefore they're totally beyond the pale. You know, I don't.
Yeah.
You know, I think we have to give credit where credit's due, and if we're
Right.
unhappy about certain things they do, we also have to give them credit for the good things they do.
Exactly. Well, where I was going to go with that was, and this may be unfair because I don't know the full extent of what they do, but I feel like where we are dropping the ball is in this government realm, where these big groups that have tons of money don't seem to spend much on lobbying. I think that that could be a help. So I find that to be a bit of a shortcoming. Then when it comes to the movement as a whole, kind of where I stand, and I've heard a lot of people give their kind of differing theories on change. I think I'm sort of starting to land in the place where I'm realizing that a lot of our movement is going to be sort of intransigent, where they're not going to be shifted from their particular position. I think it's a handful of people who are sort of persuadable. So I've always been, and I know this is kind of a maybe a wimpy take. It could sound like that, but I'm sort of in favor of all the activism. I'm glad when people are doing this or doing that,
Yeah.
or I'm just glad they're active.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I do think that there's some definite shortcomings. I kind of want to go back, let's swing back around because I've talked to so many people in the single issue campaign space recently, so I know a lot of their positions. And not to set you guys apart, but let me devil's advocate your position, just ask you what you think about this, because several of my guests recently, and I feel like I'm kind of sold on this, that the fur industry is on the ropes and could be finished off. And a very recent guest told me, there could be some serious value in finishing off an industry. So I guess my question is, do you think we could finish off the fur industry? And two, do you think that
Well,
could ripple outward?
um, yes, I think it could be finished off. I mean, as I said, it's kind of finished off here in terms of the farming, you know, fur farming,
Yeah.
and but in terms of the retail fur industry, that's not been finished off by government. It's just been finished off through direct action, and those you know those stores either going out of business or the department stores getting rid of their fur department, never reinstating it. And I think also amongst the public, a reduction in the popularity of fur because we became more aware of what it involved.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
think it is one of the, you see what tends to happen is that over here the state has been prepared to let certain industries go to the wall. The state stepped in to save HLS. Without the actions of the state, of the British state, HLS would have gone under.
Yeah.
But with other industries, they haven't done that. They didn't do it with the fur industry, and they haven't done it, for instance, with the dog racing industry, which has
Hmm.
been in decline for years. In fact, some of the kind of decentralised um, parliaments, such as in Scotland and Wales, are in the process of actually banning dog racing. The main parliament in London hasn't, but
Yeah.
they've not stepped in to save that industry. Right.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on the power of the industry
Mm.
as to
Mm.
whether the government will take action. They certainly did with animal experiments, and they certainly would do with animal farming because of
Right.
the
Right.
power of those industries, you see.
Right.
But they're prepared to let the ones that are weaker, that haven't got so much influence on governments, they're prepared to let those ones go to the wall, and that's what's happened. So with these smaller industries, and that that would include, and I think how the government is minded on these things probably varies from like one country, one nation state to another.
Sure.
But you may well find in the USA that they're not really bothered about the fur industry. They're quite prepared to, you know, allow activists to pressurize them out of business, and that may well happen. And yes, and then, you know, that is going to result in animals being spared, like I'm sure that the decline of the fur industry here in the UK did.
Yeah.
I think the difficulty is compared with when you look at, and so yes, you know, those people are doing something positive. It's like people involved in rescue do positive stuff. You know, they are saving animals and, you know, giving them a good life. But compared with the totality of the oppression of our fellow animals, those areas are very small. And so what those people are doing is valuable, and I support all those things. I mean, like I still support the hunt saboteurs financially. I support rescues financially. I appreciate that what they're doing is positive. But will what they're doing bring about widespread animal liberation? And the answer to that is no. Because
Right.
unless we change things at a more fundamental level in terms of people's mindset and in terms of, you know, the nature of our politics, we're not going to achieve that widespread animal liberation.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. It's really, really tough. I feel like all of this would just be solved by there just being, you know, not even that many more of us, but more of us.
Well, you see, if you look at if you kind of look at politics, and you look at like the number of votes that various governments have received. I mean, here the Labour government, the last election, general election here last year in, I think it was the summer of last year, the Labour government gained power by a really big majority. Only 20% of people eligible to vote voted Labour. Only 20%. I
Yeah.
think Trump, it was 30% in the
Mhm.
USA. So you're
Yeah.
not talking about changing. You're not talking about changing majority of people. You're
Right.
talking about changing a substantial minority, and that's still a large number. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not everyone. It's not even 50%.
Right. And I was even talking, not even the broad population, but I was talking more about activists, where it's just like, we just need, like, I just sort of imagine, I don't know if this is realistic, but imagine if we just had to double the number of
Yeah,
activists
yeah.
dedicated. Yeah.
Because you see what you're talking about in order to, because I kind of talk about all the small things. I don't know whether it's one of my favourite songs. You know, all the small things. That one. Although I'm not keen on the lyrics, I like the tune.
Mhm.
And to me, that's kind of, when we look at why are our fellow animals oppressed, it's kind of due to all the small things. It's due to what people choose to do as consumers, what they choose to buy, where they choose to go, how they choose to live their daily lives, and the kind of impact of that all added together. Because someone chooses to buy animal products instead of to, you know, buy the plant-based ones, you've got like all this the horror of the oppression of animals by the food industry. You know, for instance, that's just one thing. So a lot of it is these small choices that people make, and also the small choice that someone makes when they put a cross on a ballot paper. These are little things that, and most people are never going to protest. They're not. They're just not. They just want to get on with their ordinary lives and live their ordinary lives and die their ordinary deaths. And I think that's very sad. And like I said earlier, I can't understand why people just want to be like that and not, you know, strive to achieve something and not and want to be the same as everyone else. But most people, that's what most people are like that. So we're looking at how can we instigate small changes that add up altogether to a big change. You
Yeah.
see, so you're not you're not talking about the majority of people being activists in order to create change. What you're talking about is a large number of people changing things in their everyday life and changing who they support politically. That's what you're
Right.
looking at. But
Right.
we need activists in order to instigate that. So we
Yeah.
certainly don't need 20-30% of people to be vegan animal rights activists. We don't,
Right.
but
Right.
we do need a lot more. We
Well,
do
we
need a lot more.
honestly,
Yeah.
we just need a few more Ronnie Lees, honestly, because I mean, like we need those people with initiative. You mentioned the numbers. I'm sure you're accurate that millions and millions of animals were saved. I know you didn't do it alone, but you were
No,
obviously
no.
the spark that brought the ALF into existence.
Yeah, and there was some brilliant people. You see, the ALF was like is known as a leaderless,
Right.
decentralized organization, and certainly uh, that was kind of true and not true. It was in terms of like a centralized leadership, like someone, an all powerful leader. There wasn't. There wasn't
Right.
anyone at the top. Like there were people that instigated things and stuff, and there's people that set it up and set it in motion. But once it was set in motion, it gained a momentum of its own because
Right.
all people had to do was copy what other people were doing, and that's what happened. And it spread like wildfire, really, in the early days. But where there was leadership was at local level with the local groups. You had people there that, they may not have used the term leader, they might not have liked that word, but
Mhm.
in effect, that's what they were. That they were like, there were groups that called them where they were known as planners, and they were the people that kind of organized the actions and planned the actions and got the people together. And then there was other people that would just go along. They
Mhm.
didn't. They weren't interested in planning. They said, "Right, just let me know when it's happening. Tell me what to do, and I'll come along." And most
Mhm.
people in groups were like that. And then you had the ones that were kind of more organized things, the leaders. So there was leadership, and there was some really really good local leaders, some really clever people
Mhm.
at local level in the ALF that pulled off some kind of amazing raids on places.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
really, really, really incredible stuff. I mean, the number of movies that could be made about this, and there never has been.
I know. I know.
Yeah,
I talked
yeah.
to
Some of it was incredible.
I talked to Alexandra Paul, and she mentioned that she had rights to Free the Animals, the Ingrid Newkirk book, to turn that into a movie, and that they just couldn't get like a film crew to do it.
It's
And
just
great
I mean,
movie.
there was one a woman activist. I can name her because she sadly died quite some while ago.
Okay.
Sue Merrick is in the sort of Midlands area of England. She organised a raid. There was a place that had rabbits. They were even doing experiments with rabbits. So breeding animals, I suppose, rabbits, and they had a big to get into the premises. There was this big like metal shutter on this
Mhm.
place, and what they did was they just bought a car cheaply off someone and just used it just to ram. They just drove it straight into this shutter and you know broke it and just left the car there. And then other activists turned up in other vehicles and they ran in and rescued loads of animals.
Mhm. Mhm.
Stuff like that. It's like
Yeah.
really like a movie out of that. And there's loads of stuff like that.
I know.
Yeah.
That's a good question to ask you. Like, I mean, these pop culture things, like we're sitting on a wealth, like you said, of films. A lot of people sit in front of their TV and play video games, including myself. I game on this channel, and I've never played a game where you're like raiding a lab. All these people are playing these games where they're sneaking around for
Yeah. Yeah.
governments and stuff. And
I think there may be. I contributed to I think a crowdfunder for someone who was doing a game like that.
yeah, I
So I
think you're
think
talking Patrick Baboumian, right?
ideas are out there for it, and I
Yeah.
know that I've got a friend who's like a game designer, and he takes part in different games. And when he does that, like if he's in a game where like he's racing, he's in a car, his car has got Go Vegan all over it. He
Oh, yeah,
designs
yeah,
it, he
yeah.
puts that,
Nice.
so he's
Yeah,
educating the other gamers, stuff like that. It's
yeah,
very clever 'cause it's something that never occurred to me because it's something that like I kind of, in my day we didn't have like that.
right. Stuff like that, yeah.
But that's brilliant. I mean, anything like that, all these different ways of spreading the message, and we've got more ways of spreading the message now than than back in the day,
Yeah.
because we didn't have the internet. We didn't have, there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't the videos, there wasn't the gaming, there wasn't all these, there's lots of other avenues now of spreading the message that
Yeah.
didn't exist back then.
Yeah.
And we were very much like, I mean, I became vegan because of something I read. More often than not, people these days become vegan because they've seen a documentary or they've
Yep. Yep. Myself
watched a
included.
video. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So that's come
Uh,
more to the fore,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's all important.
Well, I have found just through activism or wearing a t-shirt or whatever it
Mm,
is
I
that people,
yeah,
well, what
I
I was
I
gonna,
I
oh,
I
sorry,
do
go
it
ahead.
also. I've got this one on there, which is the National Animal Rights Day T-shirt.
Yeah,
Planet,
yeah.
there's to that one. I mean, I wear, most days I wear a T-shirt promoting veganism or animal rights, and I have had some good conversations with people. I've never
Yeah.
had anyone come up to me and be unpleasant. I've never
Yeah.
had that. I mean, not saying that's not possible and it couldn't happen, but what I've had is people saying, "Oh, I'm interested in going vegan. Can you?"
Mhm.
And I have these. I'll carry around these booklets about veganism, or I'll maybe have them in the car. So
Mhm.
if someone, it's like I was at the checkout in a store, and I was wearing this T-shirt, and the woman at the checkout said, "Oh, that's an interesting T-shirt. I like that." And I
Yeah.
explained that it was National Animal Rights Day, and I went and got her this booklet from the car about veganism and gave it to her, and she said, "Oh, thank you very much."
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that kind of thing. It's all these little things, thinking about all the little things that you, as you're going around in everyday life, can I spend a little bit of time just to do a small thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because once again, it's all the small things. If we all did it, it would add up
Mhm.
to something really big. And
Yeah.
that's the idea of getting people to do that. There's something for everyone. That a lot of people, a lot of vegans, maybe couldn't go into the city to do a cube of truth or whatever, but
Mhm.
they could do something locally. They might be able to spend half an hour delivering some flyers, or just leaving them somewhere, or some other
Yeah.
small activity, and
Yeah.
it's thinking about all these small things that add up.
Putting up stickers, and
Put stickers
around.
around, yeah, 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 with
Um,
with the message on. It's all because I think just having even a sticker that said "Go vegan" or something, or
mhm.
"Live vegan," puts that idea into someone's head.
Right. Right.
Because I think a lot of people become vegan. I don't think with most people it's just one thing. I
Right.
think it's
Right.
accumulation of exposure to the message that
Exactly.
ends up with that
Normalize it.
person changing. Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. With me, I'm probably the exception because it was just that one article. Before
Yeah.
I read that article, I hadn't heard of veganism.
Right. It
I had
wasn't even
no
a,
idea about what happened to the cows and all that. As soon
yeah.
as I read that, I thought, right, I'm going vegan.
Yeah.
But that's rare. It's that it doesn't usually happen like that. It's more of
Yeah. It's almost,
it's kind of drip process, I think.
yeah, it's almost like, with the internet age, we have such a wealth of information that it's almost too much. But
Mm,
now it's like it's almost no excuse because we have it. We have it. Well, where I was going with the t-shirt, I was actually going a different direction with that. But yes, I'm a huge advocate of people doing those forms of activism that require very little, like, passive, like putting
yes,
a
yes,
bumper
that's right.
sticker, or a t-shirt or anything like that. But where I was going with that is I've gotten a lot of response, like when I've had the image of like someone in a mask, like the ALF. I see like an interest where people have like kind of uh, a fascination with the imagery of that,
Yes,
and
yeah. Um,
yeah,
that is kind of um, there's a sense in which that image is is kind of very closely associated with the ALF. It's like iconic imagery, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
There's a sense in which it's not true because I only ever wore a mask once on a
Oh,
raid,
really?
and I had to pull out of the raid because it caused my glasses to steam up and I couldn't see.
Mm.
And the only reason I wore a mask on that raid was because we had a TV crew. It was a raid on a place that bred monkeys for experiments,
Uh,
and there was a whole load of us, and there was a TV crew accompanied us. Somebody had arranged this TV crew. It was all very undercover. And the first time because you see, back the reason why the ALF is associated people with masks or ski masks is because after a raid, when animals had been rescued, there would be sort of publicity photographs taken for the newspaper, for animal rights magazines and stuff like that. And so the people posing with animals would wear the ski masks so they couldn't be identified. But on the actual raid, people didn't wear the mask because there weren't any. Most places didn't have it. I remember one place where we found out there was a camera because it had been raided a couple of times before and they'd installed a camera. And I just wrapped a scarf around my face and went in and,
it wasn't like a uniform is what you're saying.
No, but it's because people wore them for the photographs after the event with the animals that it's kind of it's become to be believed that was how
how it looked.
that you went on a raid wearing a mask, but you kind of didn't need to because most places didn't have a camera, and it would kind of more get in the way than anything else to have a mask on. So that's kind of it's a little bit of a fiction that was kind of how things happen.
Probably nowadays, if people are doing it, they probably wear a mask, I would imagine.
Nowadays, you'd have to wear some kind of face covering because but it's not just the camera in the place you'd have to worry about. It's all the cameras on the roads and
right
everywhere. That's
everywhere.
Because I remember once that myself and a friend, we kind of lived in sort of central London, and in one of the suburbs, right kind of at the edge of London, there was this guy who was a director of a slaughterhouse, and he had a rather expensive car, and we thought, right, we're going to go and damage his car. We're going to smash the windows and do various damage to it. And so we had the equipment to damage his car. So what we did was I was driving, my friend had a catapult, and we got all these little stones. And basically, on the way from where we lived to this guy's place, it was basically all these different areas of London. But basically, because it's all joined up, it was like one long high street with loads and loads of stores, shops along the high street. And I was stopping outside these various places. There'd be a butcher's shop, be a fur shop, maybe a shop that perhaps sold guns. All these different places that are associated, with the oppression of other animals. And so I was stopping outside. My friend was like using the catapult to break the window. And then we did this on the way. We wrecked the guy's car. We came back the other way. When we got near to home, we saw a butcher's van. So my friend jumped out with a hammer and smashed all the windows and lights of the butcher's van, jumped back in the car. On the way there and on the way back, we broke the windows of 85 places.
Wow.
85 places. Now, if you did that today, you'd do one and you'd be arrested because of the camera. You'd be caught with a camera and the police would be there and you'd be arrested. We did 85 plus the butcher's van and plus the guy's car. Just in one night.
Like, you
and now you'd never get away. You might do 2 or 3 before the police came, and that was it.
Right.
So that's how things have changed, because a lot of ALF actions were kind of small things like that. There were the big things, but there were the little things as well.
Yeah. I ask people a lot about this conversation I have with Jon Curtin of Camp Beagle, because it kind of shook me a little bit, because it kind of flew in the face of what I at the time was sort of doing, which was sort of like, what I'm still doing, to be honest. Is kind of, I celebrate people from the ALF, celebrate people who do direct action. But he said, he gave me this comment where he was like, he said, I don't like how ALF actions and stuff are so romanticized now, because he said, back in the day, it was just something you did. It was just something like, when we were talking about Barry Horn and Jill Phipps, and he was like, they would scoff at the idea that they were these heroes. And so he said it's disempowering to people who want to do actions that only heroes can do that. What do you think
Yeah,
about
I
that?
mean, I agree with him really, because it became a kind of everyday life thing. It was
Mm,
kind of part of our culture. It was what we did, and
yeah.
we didn't think of ourselves as heroes. It was just what we did because we were determined to do something effective to, to protect other animals. That was how it was, and I think that you kind of there is a problem of like I think hero worship is a problem because what happens is people say I'll worship this person who kind of does the stuff, and
Hmm.
I'll be a kind of spectator and watching that other person who's a great hero do all these things. And I think we kind of have it. The version of it we've got today is, I think, with some of these YouTube celebrities, who promote veganism. You get people like Joey Carbstrong and some of the
Hmm.
others, where people will watch their videos as a kind of form of activism
Mm,
instead of and saying, I watch Joey, I support Joey. Isn't it great? Joey's saving the animals. Whereas really what you want is those people to do things themselves.
right, like
And
Joey.
I'm not saying
Right.
Joey doesn't want that. I'm sure he does want that. But
Right.
what I'm saying is the attitude of the people, they'll kind of substitute substitute that person's action and their kind of hero worship of that person
Yeah. Yeah.
for their own action.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the thing. We need people to be activists and not spectators, because it doesn't matter how much you watch something. Being a spectator doesn't change anything. Doesn't
Yeah.
change anything.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
only through activism of one form or another, and it doesn't have to be like big smash bang warp activism, but it's activism of one form or another that actually changes things. You
Yeah.
don't change anything by being a spectator.
It's such a funny tension because I want people to watch my channel. So I have this dual goal of I want more
Mm.
viewers, and also the goal is to get people off YouTube.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with people watching these things as long as
For
they're
sure.
then
Yeah.
inspired to take action themselves. You
Right.
can do
Right.
both. You can do both, of course, and I
Right.
think that, there are people lots of people have been inspired to action through kind of watching videos.
Hmm.
But I
Hmm.
think that the danger of it, it's like, social media as a whole is a very double-edged sword, I think.
It
I think
is.
in some ways it can inspire activism, and it certainly provides a tool where it's easier to organize things. But on the other hand, I think people can use their situation as a spectator of social media as a substitute for activism, or
Yeah.
it can lead them to think they're achieving things when they're not. It's like, um, I mean, say on like Facebook, I'll go in a vegan group, and there are people on there that have posted horrific photographs of animals being slaughtered, and I think to myself, well, look, the only people that are going to see that are other vegans. All you're
Hmm.
doing is traumatizing other vegans. Not
Sure.
how is
Yeah.
that? But they're thinking that by somehow, if I post this, it's a form I'm kind of achieving something.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's and yet you're not. What we can be careful of on social media is that we just speak to other vegans, because it tends to be the case that, or we end up in a situation where the vast majority of our friends and followers are also vegan. You
Yeah.
know.
Or
Um,
even smaller, just activists, and that's
Or
that's how
just
mine.
that, or just activists. So kind of I tend to on my I'm mainly I mainly do Facebook really,
Hmm.
because I suppose because of my age, and that was the popular thing at the time. But what I put on there is aimed at other vegans, because the vast majority of my friends on there are vegan.
Hmm.
So there's no
Hmm.
point in me putting it, imagery on stuff to try to educate people to become vegan, because they already are.
Right.
My what I put on there is more about encouraging people to become active, or encouraging people to broaden their view of what veganism is, because I think some people have a very narrow view of veganism, and it's actually it's actually a very wide ranging. There's a focus of vegan, and there's a big scope of veganism as well, and they're both important.
Yeah. And in a way, like in my case, I can just use my example. The longer I've been a vegan and an activist, the more my circle is those people. So
Yeah,
maybe at the very start, everybody was a non-vegan, and maybe I had some impact. But then when you post those images that are gruesome, I know it's valuable because people have seen it, but they're not going to see anymore because they're going to start muting your stuff. They're not going to.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
You've got to be what we did. A local vegan group during lockdown when we weren't able to get out, and it was mainly something I kind of did on their behalf, because we advertised, we placed adverts promoting veganism. Sometimes it's promoting anti-vivisection as well, and it was on Facebook and Instagram, and it was mainly in the form of short videos. But I was really careful never to use graphic images. I use kind of images that would invoke sadness, like maybe like there was one where a calf was taken away from a cow
yeah,
and being driven off, and the cow was running after the trailer.
yeah,
So it's not graphic, but it's evocative.
yeah,
And I was really careful for that very reason, that it can just turn people off. And so I think
yeah.
you've got to strike the right balance when you're trying to do that with non-vegans. I think you've got to strike the right balance so they'll carry on watching, but they'll still be moved.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, you know, you brought up Joey Carbstrong. I've been a big fan of Joey's.
Mm.
I wonder if uh, um it's kind of awkward to ask you to name a few people who you think are doing the good work, because then other people don't get named and they're like, wait, but what about me? But are there some people that you think are just like, oh man, that like follow this person, or that person's really
I,
doing it?
I, I, I don't. It's hard for me to say because I don't spend an awful lot of time watching those videos.
Right, right.
I mean, probably one of the early ones would have been Earthling Ed. Whether
Hmm.
Earthling Ed's still going on that, I don't know. And there are others, but it's not an area that, because I'm already vegan. I don't see there's much to gain for me from watching
Dwelling. Yeah.
those things, and it's time as well. Um, it's kind of deciding where I'm going to devote my time, and I'm mainly spending time kind of organising things locally and
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Well, beyond watching people, one of the things I always ask people are like, are there certain like books that have like meant a lot to you, inspired you? And
Uh,
oh, and by the way, I should mention, since you mentioned Earthling Ed, he did just the other day announce his new book, which you can pre-order. So I should mention that.
oh, right, yeah. I know he's done. This must be his third book, is it, or his second
Yeah,
book? It's got,
yeah, it'll be his
um,
third.
the book that kind of confirmed, it really confirmed what I already believed. It was a book that was published in 1975 by a book
Yeah,
called Richard Ryder's Victims of Science,
yeah,
and it
yeah. I
was
had that
where
written down there.
he talked about speciesism. He was the guy that coined the word speciesism, and he'd done that in some articles, I think several years earlier. But
Mhm.
it was in that book that it kind of really he sort of made it prominent through. And it's mainly a book against vivisection. I think he was somehow involved in animal experimentation at Oxford University, and then he turned against it.
Mm.
And wrote, and it was Victims of Science, I found, was very, but it kind of more, it wasn't that I changed my views because of reading Victims of Science. It's more that it confirmed
Right.
what I already believed, and I think it kind of, and it also gave me other ways of expressing things, like the word speciesism.
Hmm.
I'd not
Hmm.
used that word or thought of that word before then, and I thought, yeah, that's a good word to use. That's what's happening, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's probably the one that sticks in my mind because it's like the first one I've read. I mean, I've read a lot of books. I don't read very much now, but
Mm.
in my earlier life, I read a lot of books.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that
So that
sticks in
was
my mind because it was the first one.
Yeah, Richard Ryder, Victims of Science.
Yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
said, yeah. Um, yeah. Oh, well, I lost my train of thought. Oh, I wanted to ask you, that book, Free the Animals, that Ingrid Newkirk wrote about how the
Yes,
ALF came to America. You're described in that book as the anonymous person named Valerie goes to the UK and meets you for
yes.
the first time. Is that how it happened? Was that the story
Uh,
accurate?
that that it's not entirely. It's all of that's not entirely accurate.
I see. I see.
I don't know how much to say about it because obviously I don't want to kind of spoil the popularity of that book.
Right,
But
right, right.
it's not an entirely accurate account of what happened.
I see, I see.
Some of it is accurate and some of it isn't.
Yeah, but
From
but
what I
it
remember.
but
Yeah.
it's true that someone flew to America. I mean, flew to
It's
the
true
UK
that
and took that
it
train.
wasn't, it wasn't just Valerie. There are other people as well from the States that came to to, to talk to me and then went back there.
Oh, I see, I see. Interesting.
So that, I mean, to what extent that seeded the ALF in the States, or whether because what happened, how the ALF sprang up in other countries wasn't really to do with anyone going there to talk to those people or anyone coming here to talk to me or other ALF activists. It was just those people copying because it was such an easy thing to copy because the ALF principles were first of all, it's direct action, it's property damage, or it's rescuing animals. Do your best not to, not to cause harm to living beings while you're doing it.
Mhm.
And that was kind of, I think there might have been some other, but that was about it. That was the main. And
Mhm.
then if you abide by that, then you can call yourself an ALF activist and call your action an ALF action. So it's a really easy thing to replicate. You didn't have
Right.
to sign a form and go through a questionnaire or anything. You just kind of did
Yeah,
the
yeah.
thing. And
Yeah.
so that was the reason why it was copied and replicated everywhere. It was more like that than any kind of personal conversation with anyone.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, it was just something. Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't really understand that. Like you mentioned, it's this leadership
Yeah.
leaderless
It
group.
was more
And
people just copied. It was people copied what we did.
yeah, how often does someone like well, I guess back in the day, how do I join the ALF? How do I sign up for the ALF,
You
you
just
know?
join it by doing shit.
Yeah,
That's how
yeah.
you do it. You join it through your activism. I mean, I did used to go round. I remember I put this video together. We got two VHS recorders, and there were people that had kind of done raids and taken videos, and there was photographs and that. And I kind of connected these two recorders, and I kind of made a video uh, promoting the ALF. And I used to go around giving talks and like blatantly show this video and blatantly encourage people to become active.
Mhm.
It's and I was never arrested for doing that. I think it kind of may have played a bit of a part in my trial that I was doing
Mhm.
stuff like that. But I going around, all over the UK to different cities, showing this video and giving a talk. And the places would be packed. There'd be like 100, 200 people in these halls, listening to this. I mean, they weren't all going to, and people did, I do know that there were some people became active because of it. Because I got arrested by the police once and accused of inciting people to be active, but it never went anywhere. I didn't say anything and they let me go.
Mhm. Mhm.
But it never went any further than that at the time. So there was that, and that probably encouraged some activism, but mostly it was just people just copying.
Yeah, yeah. Um, if I were you, and looking back over the years, I think I'd temper, making it about me. But I think I'd feel a lot of pride in what the ALF was, and also, realizing that the job was never finished, of course. Like,
Yeah.
but what do
Um,
you feel when you look back?
oh, I mean, I do feel pride in obviously if you're play a part in creating an organization that has resulted in the lives of millions of our fellow animals being spared, then it would be very strange not to feel proud about that, to
Hmm.
be quite
Hmm.
honest. So
Yeah.
yes, I think that But however good the ALF was and however effective it was, I think that as I said earlier, in order to achieve animal liberation, we've got to operate at a more fundamental level, and we've got to, instead of being rebels, you see, we kind of have to be revolutionaries. In other words, rebels are you're going up all the time against the existing system, trying to force change. Whereas we need to replace, we need to be the system. We need to find a way of taking over, because until we do, we're only ever going to achieve very little. And I think that's how my thinking about it has changed. It isn't that it's bad to be a rebel. Of course, it's great. Anyone that takes any sort of, there's so few people take any sort of action at all, isn't there? And there's so few people,
exactly.
Most people in their everyday lives are contributing all the time to the oppression of our fellow animals, aren't they? Through their lifestyle, through what they do. And so anyone that, first of all, decides to do their best no longer to be involved in that, first of all, that's a very positive. And then if people decide, right, I'm going to go further than that, I'm going to take some sort of action to protect other animals.
Yeah.
Then all of that is all really praiseworthy. All these people are very, very rare, aren't they? They're kind of gems in society.
Yeah.
So because I think we can all be heroes. I think anyone who kind of takes action for animal liberation in whatever way they can is a hero, aren't they? That they are. They have taken an extraordinary action compared with the vast majority of other humans.
Right. Yeah, I said to one of my recent guests that, who had rescued animals, like in the context of John's comment, we're not heroes, we're ordinary people. But I did say, at least to those animals, even by the very definition of the word, the animals you saved, you are by definition their hero. You're a hero.
Well, yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, you're the rescue, or even actions that spare other animals that don't involve their sort of physical rescue.
Right.
And in fact, I think that's how the majority are going to be spared or have been spared, because we can only physically rescue a very small number.
Right.
There's not the capacity to, all the rescues are at bursting point, aren't they? They can only take so many. That's a tiny fraction compared with all the ones that are oppressed and exploited. So I think more animals are spared through action.
Yeah.
Than even if it's a tiny action, for every person, say in the UK, that becomes vegan, and it may be more in the USA. In terms of the animals, in the UK, every person who becomes vegan, that equates to about 100 animals per year spared, because it creates a reduction in demand for those animals to be exploited and killed. And so you could argue that probably that you see, I think the thing about vegan outreach is that it has a long-term strategic goal and aim, and of totally transforming society, as I would explain, through changing people's lifestyle, but also changing politics, changing people's philosophy, lifestyle, changing politics. You can create this widespread change through that. That's a long-term aim. But in the short term, for every person that you educate to become vegan, you can say, well, that's 100 animals a year spared, or whatever it is. It varies according to different countries. But I would imagine in the USA, per capita consumption of animal products is probably higher than here. I'm not sure.
I think so.
Probably is. Apparently, Argentina is a huge. I read that in Argentina they're huge consumers of animal products for some reason. I don't know whether that's because the beef industry is so big there. But but yeah, so in the short term, it isn't just that you're looking at something in the long term that might never happen.
Right.
It's because whatever strategy we choose and we feel is best in terms of achieving animal liberation, these are all really long-term things. They're really long-term. It's all long-term. But with vegan education, you've got a kind of, you've got a gain in the short term as well. of these animals that are spared to educating others just not to contribute to what happens to them.
Yeah. And then hopefully they become active. I know we've
Well,
gone
yeah.
long. I have a few more questions. I always worry like when I'm like over the 2 hour mark, how many
Oh
people
no, don't
actually
worry.
stick
No, carry
around.
on.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but I have a few more questions. One of my questions is, I really enjoyed that book. Like I said, it came out in 2017, I think. So
Yeah.
if that book were to come out today, what happened in those 8 years that would fill up
What
those
what what's
pages?
going to happen more since then is I've gone more into the vegan outreach.
Mm,
I was more involved in the Green Party then. I still am a little bit involved in my local Green Party with one of our local councillors on our local district council is vegan, and I help just distribute help deliver her newsletters.
mm,
But I've got more into the vegan education because I think that it's once again looking at a fundamental level that we kind of before even if we are thinking about the Green Party as as a vehicle for political change, that isn't really going to be that until there's a lot more vegan influence within it, and that means educating a lot more people to become vegan. So I've kind of started looking at things at an even more fundamental level, which is why I've gone more into the vegan outreach.
mhm,
And I think maybe since then I've started doing concentrating even more on my local area in terms of that, and more on the local community. And I think that's kind of probably how things have changed a bit since the book was written.
oh, yeah. Um, I talked to somebody who, a lot of these guys and that went on to do direct action in the 80s and 90s were punk music inspired. And I remember
Mm.
talking to, I think it was Peter Young who said, I took it for granted that these punk rock guys were just playing music. I hope I've got the right person. Um, and then doing ALF raids at night. And he was like, then I found out that wasn't true. Well, but it was true for you because you had a punk band called Total Control, and I
Yeah, we
found it
started.
on YouTube.
Yes, what it was we were all Hunt Sabs or ALF activists, all of us, and it was kind of myself and a guy called Gary Treadwell he'd been involved in the ALF. He'd been in prison. He was in prison for there was a raid on an organisation that promoted hunting, and he took part in that and was arrested. And he spent a few months in prison, Gary. And we were working at an animal sanctuary, both working at an animal sanctuary, and he was a guitarist. And you know, he started kind of putting together some songs, to do with animal liberation. And he'd kind of do the tunes and some of the lyrics, and I'd sort of fill in the lyrics,
Hmm.
and we were writing these songs, and then we had the idea, well, what? Why don't we form a band, form a punk band? Because he got me into the punk music. I remember being in jail on my second sentence, and that was when that was in 77,
Mm,
between 77 and 78, I think, and it was when punk started the rise of punk around about that time. And I thought these punk rock people were terrible because all the publicity was about them fighting, spitting at the audience. I thought, oh, they're shocking, shocking people. And then when I got out of jail, Gary said to me, he said, what do you think of this punk rock? I said, oh, I think it's terrible. They're just spitting and fighting. He said, no, he said, it's absolutely brilliant. He said, come to my house. I've got some LPs. Come and listen. And I went there. He played the Ramones, put the Ramones on. I thought it was fantastic.
mhm.
Absolutely fantastic. It was the first punk I listened to, Ramones. This is great. I love this. And so we got into the punk. And funny enough, I mean, he used to dress in the punk gear. I never dressed in the punk gear. They must have thought I was at the wrong gig when I went along. There's all these people in Mohicans and all the stuff. And I was sat
Yeah,
there just like in a bomber jacket,
yeah, yeah.
But I was into the music. And the Clash, I saw the Clash quite a number of times. Uh, and a lot of the band. I think I saw Sex Pistol was once, and the Jam, a few of the others. and so we were like really into the action, and so we got together with some other people that were sort of like musicians. There was another guy, Aubrey Thomas. He's still a quite prominent hunt sab, and he'd been in jail as well. He was in jail for the same thing as Gary when they raided the blood sports place. And he was a guitarist, and then there was a guy from Hunt Sabs who was a drummer, and we had several bass players, but we kind of, the guy that ended up as the main bass player, he was his father was the chair of the Hunt Sabs, and so we were all direct action people,
Yeah.
and so we kind of and like it was a lot of those most of those songs were actually, the tune was written by Gary, and a lot of the lyrics were written by me. That's the time we had. That's how we tended to operate. And yeah, it was great. It was crazy. It was mad time. But that band only lasted about 2 years, perhaps less. And we had some crazy incidents with it, with it, and we tried to we were trying to educate people as well. We used to produce, because it's quite often difficult to hear the vocals because the guitars are loud, and we produced like these song sheets with the words on that we'd give to people at the gigs, because we thought the words were like really important. Like
They were
my main criticism of the music industry, is that you get the most lovely, great melodies, great tunes, and the lyrics are just you're just like pap. You know what I mean? About no political deep message in them at all. But ours were, ours were about, mainly about ALF stuff. So yeah, so we were, it was a crazy time. I remember we were at a gig where we were the support band at this gig, and there were some quite well known bands, following us, like local bands. And it was in this hall, and basically, it's Aubrey had the idea that we had a couple of backing vocalists, and he wanted us to go out in like a kind of dramatically. So he at the end of it, we had one of these, a thing called a drain tester, which kind of was like, it's like a big smoke bomb thing.
Oh, right.
He wanted one of the backing vocalists to set it off at the end of our set, you see. So there was a misunderstanding, and she set it off after we'd only done about 2 numbers. But the whole, it had to be the thing had to be abandoned, because the whole place just totally filled with this smoke, and this hall had to be evacuated.
Yeah.
And we had to flee, because the other bands that were on after us wanted to kill us because we destroyed the gig.
Yeah.
And it was just mad. We just fled. We just left and went home.
It's awesome. Oh, that's so great.
That was just that one example of it. That it was like a crazy time. And we had a number. I wrote one of the numbers I wrote. It was there was an incident where a guy called Lord Mountbatten, a prominent army guy, but he was also a shooter. He's a killer of animals. He used to shoot birds and everything. And anyway, he was a member of the royal family. He was blown up by the IRA, you see. So we made a song. I wrote a song about how everyone's upset about this guy being killed, and the Queen's upset, but we don't care because he was like horrible, basically.
To animals, yeah.
And it was called Donegal Bay because that was where he was blown up.
Yeah.
And anyway, so our drummer arranged for us to do. There was this like, it was an event in a local park in South London. It's like a festival, and it was there was bands on the stage, and it was very prestigious to play on the stage at this festival, you see. And there was some, fairly, fairly acclaimed that local bands used to play on. And anyway, our drummer Steve, he knew the organizer of the festival, and he managed to get. He was all pleased. Said, "I've got us a place on the stage. We're going to actually play on the stage at this festival. This is brilliant." Anyway, we went on the stage. We did a couple of numbers, and then we did Donegal Bay. And some of the audience took offence to it, and a guy started throwing eggs at us from the audience. And I just made a joke. I just sort of hope those are free range. I mean, that really, I should have said, "Don't throw eggs, throw tofu," or something, because that was a vegetarian joke I'd made, whereas I should have made it. You see. Anyway, some of them hit Steve's drums, and he jumped in the audience and was chasing this bloke. And it's crazy. And after that, he left the band. He said, "You shouldn't have done that song because somebody, he complained about that we did that song because his drums got hit with eggs." So that was more or less the end of the band. It never was the same again after that. He did get another drummer, but it was never the same. So there was all these things, these crazy things that happened with it,
Yeah.
But I suppose that was punk, really. It was all a bit like that.
Yeah,
But I think it did have a lot of influence, that there was like this connection kind of between the ALF and punk. But you see, the thing about punk and the thing about the ALF, the other connection is do it yourself.
Yeah.
You see, the punk was do it yourself music, like garage bands, The Clash had a song, didn't they, called Garage Band? That it was do it yourself. You didn't need anyone to come along and show you what to do. You just did it yourself under your own initiative. Even though you might not be great musicians, you'd put it together, you'd go and do it, right?
Yeah.
But the ALF was like that. It was do it yourself. It's people acting under their own initiative. So there's that link of like people being instigators, people doing it yourself. And to me, that it was similar, although one was music and the other one was like direct action for the animals. There was that link of autonomy, that autonomous that feeling of autonomy, that autonomous movement, so to speak.
Yeah.
That was very similar in those in those two things.
Yeah. I agree completely. That I found it, by the way. You can listen to it. I'm gonna link it below. It's good. And I wonder. You had talked about how we're all sitting on this, like there's movies, there's wealth. I wonder, like, even just for historical significance, I wonder if there'd be some label that would want to put that demo out.
I don't know really. It was I've had over the years, I've had people that have said to me, "I'm going to put this on a disc," but it's never, or on a CD or whatever, or get it released. It's never happened. It's never kind of come to anything. So
well, that's a shame.
I don't know. We did do. I mean, very sadly, we did do another recording that's in a recording studio that's been lost.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That was a shame. No one seems to have any copies of it. Of some other numbers.
What I found was like 5 songs put
it's
together.
5, yeah. But we had loads, to be quite honest. We had lots of numbers. Yeah. And they weren't all. They were mostly kind of punky. Some were slower.
But you were the singer, I guess we should say. Yeah,
I was the vocalist, mainly because I couldn't play any instrument. But I did used to, I used to contribute a lot.
Didn't let that stop.
I wrote a lot of the lyrics on it, But Gary didn't stay with the band. He kind of left the band and went back to work, because we then moved to London. You see, we're at the Sanctuary, both moved back to London and got the band going. But then he eventually went back and worked at the Sanctuary and left the band. And we got another guy called Rick. The photo, Rick is the guy with the long hair. He was the lead guitarist, and he's a brilliant musician, actually. And he's still in a band to this day. Rick. I mean, Rick was the only one out of us that was a real musician, to be quite honest.
Oh yeah.
And the kind of riffs that are in the middle of some of the guitar work that's in the middle of those numbers, that you've got on there. That's Rick doing the lead guitar. But
Yeah.
no, it was yeah, it was fun, and it was very much in keeping with what we all do. And we used to, I don't know a number called. There's a band that were around at the time. I think they were a little bit pre-punk, perhaps, called the Flaming Groovies, and they had a number called Shake Some Action. And when I was involved in an ALF group in North London, before we went on a raid, we used to play that song, Shake Some Action.
Oh, yeah?
Because it
Nice.
was about action. Yeah, look it up on YouTube. Yeah, it's a good number.
Yeah.
So we used to play Shake Some Action before we went out on a raid to get us fired up.
Nice. Nice.
So we'd go out in this old car that we bought between us.
Oh, yeah?
Go
I'll
raid
find
somewhere.
that one for sure.
Yeah, find that one. Yeah, that's because we'd be 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes we'd go going and doing stuff. It's
Yeah,
just
you were
full
you
on.
were
Yeah,
doing it so much, yeah.
yeah.
It's
Because you could then. It's completely. Things have changed so much since then.
mhm,
It's a completely different world. I mean, when you look at communication, like talking earlier, about social media, that there were no cell phones. There were no, the most you had was like a landline,
yeah,
and there was no internet, and yet people still used to manage to organise stuff
yeah,
and do stuff and communicate. And people today think, how the hell did you ever organise anything or get together or speak to one another? But we
yeah,
did. We
yeah.
found ways of doing that, and it kind of yeah,
Yeah,
and yeah, I was just going to say more went on in a lot of ways. More went on then than does now.
yeah, yeah, it's like this weird dichotomy. It's kinda like the thing I was saying, how, like, we have all this information now, there's no excuse. You're described in
Yeah.
the book, being in a payphone, organizing all these
Yeah,
people
yeah.
to
I used to organise stuff from. I mean, we organised a night of action against vivisectors where it was mainly damage being done to their cars or
mhm,
slogans painted on their houses and things. All
mhm,
across the country there was this night of action where there was all probably 30, 40 actions in a night, and that was all organised on payphones.
mhm,
People in phoning up in to coordinate it all. You know, yeah, it's unthinkable these days. That I mean that kind of thing wouldn't happen these days anyway. But organising anything,
yeah,
organise anything now. We've got social media and events on Facebook and stuff like that. But you'd actually get more people. I mean, the marches that we used to have, and the big anti-vivisection marches back in the 1980s. There was one that's 20,000 people on it. Now,
mhm,
when they do the annual anti-vivisection march here, there's about 500.
yeah.
You know,
I know,
um,
Peter Young said this, and I think he's right that, it was just because it was more limited in what you could find out. So he was talking about the communiques, and he said, I would read those, and I would you would hang on every word because that was all you had. So you
mm,
studied like every word in the communique. And now I think it's like a psychological thing where it's like if I was in a library filled with books, I mean, it's like that's overwhelming. But if you put one book down and that's all I have is just that's the one, I'll
you're
probably
going to
read
read
that
it.
book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that might be. I think there are other changes in society as well, and I think particularly changes. Certainly here in the UK, and it may be a worldwide thing. Changes that have affected young people and the involvement of young people in action, because
Mm,
we were almost all either late teens or early 20s, the rise of the animal rights movement here in the UK in the 1970s. It's all young people. You get the odd older people. You'd have people that were a lot older who'd
mhm.
been campaigning for years, and they were like over the moon that there was all these young people. I thought it was absolutely brilliant that suddenly there are all these other people doing stuff. But those
Mhm.
older people were really quite rare, and it was all young people. It's all young
Yeah.
people on the demos, on the actions, doing information stands, and it was all young people. But now, when there's a demonstration here, these days, like a protest outside, perhaps a research lab or something like that. There's hardly any young people, and it's mostly retired people. You're far more likely to get someone over 60 than you are to get someone in their 20s. It's
Yeah.
completely the other way around now.
Yeah.
Completely the
Yeah.
other way around. The young people are kind of, where are they? There's so few.
Right.
There's one or two, and there's some, there are some good young activists, but very few.
Yeah. And
That,
and we need that youthful energy, because when
we
you
need
have
that. Well, what it was you see, we were people really without commitments. We were people
yeah,
that were kind of, we didn't have a mortgage. We didn't have a family, like kids and all that. And, we
yeah,
didn't have like a job to hold down. We were all before that, if you see what I mean.
yeah.
And like probably most of us were living with our parents,
Mhm, mhm.
and so it kind of, there weren't the constraints that
Mhm.
seem to kind of take hold, as life goes on. That
Right,
wasn't,
right.
we didn't have that, so we were freer to do stuff.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem to be the case with young people now. There's not that.
Mm.
Um, it's kind of gone. And you think, well, where are they all? Are they all on social media?
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah,
gonna say.
and it's strange because when there are surveys into, the number of people that are vegan, it's always that younger age group where there's a higher percentage of vegans. It's still the younger people who
Mhm.
are more likely to become vegan, but they're not activists.
Yeah.
Certainly not out in the outside world activists.
Yeah, I think it might just be the internet and social media and people just being glued to their phones. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I mean, I was in a pub a while back, and there was these young people sat at a table. There was a group of about 6 of them sat together. They met up at the table, and every single one of them was on their phone. They weren't
Yeah, I
talking
know.
to one another. They're all on their phone. But
It's like
perhaps they were talking to one another on their phone instead of
yeah,
like. Oh, it's so
exactly.
bizarre. It's like surreal. Yeah, but
Yeah, I
that's how
know.
it's gone that way. And
It's kinda
but
sad.
I mean, I just keep. I mean, we've had a big decline in activists locally
Yeah,
for various reasons. I mean, COVID and the lockdown and that affected activism a lot. Got people out the habit of doing activism and then never got back into it, and that's
right,
happened
right.
a lot over here. But I just keep going. I do a lot of stuff on my own, and I
Yeah,
tailor it so I can do it myself. So it's
yeah,
not something that requires a few people, because I can't always guarantee that I'll get other people.
yeah.
And I
I'm
think
kinda the same.
we have to think about how we can still be effective with small numbers, rather than, constantly, kind of beating ourselves up or complaining about lack of numbers, because that
Right,
won't create more numbers.
right, right.
We've just got to think, well, okay, so we haven't got the numbers, so how, how can we still be effective with the small numbers that we have got?
Yeah. I tend to, as much as I possibly can, do my own thing just because I
Mm,
see that people get bogged down, they have
yeah,
disagreements that are lead to paralysis, and, I just try to stay out of that, but at the same time, I do think that some of the best work that I've done were when I was organizing. I just know that me personally, it
yeah,
takes
yeah,
quite a bit
yeah.
out of me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, if you have more people that are involved in organising stuff, then you can achieve a lot more. With
Right.
you are more limited if you're just doing stuff on your own, or with a very small number, of course.
Yeah.
But I think if that's all you've got, that's what you got to go with, and you can't spend too much time, getting upset over lack of numbers. I mean, I'm hoping that numbers will come back. I'm hoping that will, that will there'll be a resurgence in numbers as time goes on. And
Yeah.
maybe there
Yeah.
will be. But you just got to keep going.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, like, you you strike me as someone who's very accessible. You talk about your history, um, and I'm sure in some ways that's, like, so that people can have some context and some inspiration as well. So, like you say, you keep going, and it's just very impressive to see you and Roger Yates do that nice chat every once in a while. It's pretty cool. I like
Yes.
that. And
Yeah. Well, Roger's kept going, and what we've done, we've kept going through various different types of activism. And I think one of the problems with people that were ALF activists is they've not been able to transition to other forms of activism.
mm,
Once they were no longer able to do ALF, they kind of either did nothing at all, or they maybe got involved in some rescue,
mhm,
but they didn't get involved in other forms of campaigning. And I kind of looked to try and find an explanation for that, and I think there's at least two. I think one is that they probably felt that nothing could ever match the ALF. Nothing
mm,
could ever match the feeling they got from being involved, the exhilaration. And there is that,
right. Yeah.
that nothing could match that, so that they're therefore nothing else attracted them. And
Mhm,
also it might be that they have difficulty, like, engaging with the public. In other words, the ALF, we didn't engage with the public at all. Didn't have to speak to people on the street or anything. Whereas a lot of other forms of activism do involve that, and maybe they're people that just can't do that.
mm,
And so if they're going to do anything, it'll be something else that is more isolationist, like rescue, where you're just dealing with the animals and you're not having to deal with the public.
yeah.
So that's my sort of theorizing about why that is. But that, very few really of sort of ALF activists I've known through the years,
Yeah.
once they are no longer able to be involved in ALF, there's only quite a small number have been able to transition to other forms of activism.
Mm. Well, yeah, I thought that was kind of an interesting part of the book where it was describing you having this trepidation about speaking to the public. This person's done
I
all these
did.
ALF
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I did. Yeah, they were like kind of, uh, I wouldn't say so much the enemy, but it was like alien to me to kind of
Yeah.
do that. But I sort of forced myself. I thought, well, look, you've got to do that. What else are you going to do?
Yeah.
So I went with some people that, I kind of went along with. Well, it was my mother-in-law and a friend used to do stalls,
Mhm.
anti-vivisection stalls, and I went with them, helped them, and kind of got used to talking to people, and that's how
Yeah.
I, you know.
Yeah,
And
you
now
got
I don't find it, to me, it's not a problem now. I think it's quite, you know, it's not something I worry about. I used to do,
yeah, you do it a lot, though, right?
even years ago, I used to do a lot of street stalls on my own.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I love that you talk about with the punk music, it's that do it yourself, and you just really embody that, like even forcing
Yeah.
yourself through situations that,
I
you
I
found uncomfortable.
that's right. I think autonomy is very important. You see, I think that, like, the sort of strong point of the ALF was autonomy, because no one was waiting around for someone to tell them what to do.
Right.
Because if you're waiting around for somebody to tell you what you do, you're waiting around for someone else to organise something, then that limits the amount of action you do.
Yeah.
But because the ALF was like, I mean, they were organisers at a local level, but because rather than having someone central that kind of just gave the orders to everyone, you had lots of these local groups where people were organising things and other people joining. That that greatly increased the amount of action. It led
Mhm.
to a very large amount of action taking place.
Yeah.
And I think that that can be applied to any form of action. It can be applied to vegan outreach. If people are waiting round for, say, the next cube of truth or whatever, then they're waiting for someone else to organise that, and that might be once every month.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas if people thought, well, all right, I might go on that, but in the meantime, I'm going to organise some stuff myself. I'm going to do some stuff myself in my own local area. I'm not going
Yeah.
to be wait around to be told what to do by a global organisation. I'm going to do my own
Mhm.
thing. and
Yeah.
that's that's that, or it's that autonomy, that sort of local autonomy that we're lacking,
Yeah.
and it's really important because it leads to far more action taking place.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's I have a huge amount of gratitude to you, Ronnie. Learning about the ALF is just learning how people are just fighting this war against
Mm,
the animal exploitation industries for
yeah,
decades before I even,
yeah,
for years
but
before I even came into existence is very
yeah,
meaningful.
yeah. I mean, I still regard it as a war, and in a sense, I still think of myself as warrior. It's just I fight the war in a different way. But my
Yeah.
mindset is still very much like I'm a warrior
Hmm.
for the animals, for animal liberation. And that's what drives me on. All right, like I'm not using the same tactics, but we have to be flexible. We have to adjust our tactics according to what the enemy does, so to speak. Right.
Right.
So
Right.
what's happened? We went to do it one way, and like we were blocked off by the enemy, like through the actions of the state. So I
Hmm.
think, hang on, we can't do it that way anymore. But what other way can we do it now? We're not going
Hmm.
to stop fighting, but we're just going to find another way of doing it that has
Yeah.
more chance of succeeding. That's how you look at it. And I think that someone that just say regularly and determinedly say writes all they can do is say write a letter to their local newspaper. Right,
Hmm.
say that's all they can do, and that's something that's gone a little bit out of fashion because of the internet. But I mean, I still do it locally in our
Hmm.
newspaper. I've had quite a lot of letters published on
Nice.
different things,
Nice.
mainly
Yeah.
veganism, anti-vivisection, stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I encourage other people to do the same and help them to do the same. And because you get lots of people still read those. But even
Hmm.
if that's all someone does, and they're determined to do it, and I'd say, well, they in their own way, they're a warrior.
Hmm.
They have purposely devoted that time to campaigning for our fellow animals. You
Yeah.
know, it
Who
doesn't
have
have to be
so few
smash bang
people.
wallop.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be smash bang wallop. And
Right.
the vast majority of people can't do the big direct action, especially these
Yeah.
days. They can't. And so, there's something for everyone. We can all be warriors for the animals in our own way.
Yeah. Well, beautifully said. So I know you're not really on social media that much. You're on Facebook, but ordinarily I put some links down below to direct people to, follow the person or what would you like me to put below? Are there some links that people could follow you or
It's
your
mainly it's
work?
mainly it's mainly my it would mainly be my Facebook because
Okay.
I tend to more the vegan group I'm involved in is on other social media, but I'm mainly just on Facebook.
I see.
So it'd be
Okay.
my Facebook link, which is I think my Facebook name is General Ronnie Lee,
Oh, okay.
which is
Nice.
kind of a joke
Yeah.
because basically I couldn't get Ronnie Lee because obviously there's lots of Ronnie Lees.
Right.
And it was the same when I first set up my first email that I thought, well, when I was on trial, I was called the general. You see, what happened was the police and the prosecutor gave us all different ranks because I think I don't think they could comprehend that there was this leaderless organisation that we all had to have ranks, and I was the general, there was these lieutenants, and there was foot soldiers, and it was all like that. You see.
Right.
And so I was called the general because they wanted to give me the longest sentence, which they did. And
Hmm.
so I thought, jokingly, I'll use that. I'll put General General Ronnie
General
Lee as
Lee.
my
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, and then you mess with that guy in prison who was a captain, right? And then they messed with him.
yeah, that was hilarious. He was a captain and basically he'd been a captain in the Navy, and he'd become an alcoholic, and it was a sad story. And through his alcoholism, and he lost his family. He'd become like a petty thief.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was in the prison I was in. He was in a cell, like more or less across from me. And he was always saying, and a lot of the guys would wind him up because he kind of shout and swear and stuff if they did, and
Yeah.
that's what it's like in prison. And they'd go, you know, he said, and he'd have this thing, I'm a high-ranking officer, you know, you don't speak to me like that. I'm a captain. I'm the highest ranking officer in this prison. And they say, no, you're not. No, you're not. There's a general. There's a general across in that cell. No, there's not. There's no one higher than me. Yes, there is. There's a general. And he'd go mad that I was known as a general, that I was supposedly high rank. And so I kind of, and he loved the royal family, loved the Queen, you know. And I said, well, I'm friends with the Queen. No, you're not. You're not friends with the Queen. She wouldn't have anything to do with you. Yes, I am. I'm friends with the Queen. Yeah, I know the Queen. And what I did was I got somebody to forge a letter from the Queen to make it out and send it to me. And it was, dear Ronnie, I hope you're all right in prison. It's not too bad. And then it was signed Her Majesty the Queen. I said, look, I got a letter from the Queen. He went mad.
Yeah.
Because he thought the Queen had written a letter to me. But he was like, yeah, it was really funny. It was, yeah.
You were quite the practical joker, according to the book. And tell me, and then we'll wrap up, because I know that people, I just worry that nobody listens.
Yeah.
At a certain point, but I love the story about the frog in prison. The guy who
the guy that well, yes, you see, because the thing was that, because you see, prison is a big rumor factory, because most guys in there are bored, and stuff gets really exaggerated. And so, because, you know, I was a general and all that, and they, you know, some of them thought I was some kind of gang leader, that I had all these kind of guys that could do my bidding.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where that story came from. That when I said the boys, you know, I threatened this guy that the boys would get him, and he believed it, and he was really frightened.
Yeah, just to tell him what, like, he had, I guess, accidentally stepped on a frog or something. He came to you.
Well, apparently he said he didn't. The frog he didn't actually tread on the frog, but the other guy said he tried to, but he said, no, I didn't. The frog jumped out in front of me, and you know, that was his, which was true, I don't know, but there was another time where it started that we were allowed to use the telephone. They installed a payphone, and we could pay money, get a special card, and use this payphone. And I used to be, and we'd have to book a slot, and you could only use it 10 minutes a night. And I'd be on there every night, because I had lots of friends to speak to, family and that. And I was walking down a corridor in the prison one day, and this guy came up to me, and he said to me, he said, Ronnie, he said, is it true that you can have people killed? And I said to him, I said, don't go. How did you find that out? I said, how did you find that out? He said, I just heard it. I said, don't go telling people that. I don't want people to find out about that. I said, I'm already doing 10 years. I don't want to get any more time. I said, just don't be quiet about that. Don't spread that. And he said, oh yeah, but how do you have them killed? How do you have them killed? I said, I just make a phone call. And then he said, oh, is that why you're always on the phone? But that's how crazy it was, that I could have people. Well, where did that come from? But you see, that's what happens in there. It's a rumor factory, and they did think. And then another time, I was just sat. This was like what they call a semi-open prison, where you allowed quite a lot of freedom within the prison grounds. And there was a library, and it was a sunny day. I was sat against the wall of the library reading the book, and there was a path some distance away. And I think these guys walking along the path, I don't think they didn't realize I could overhear them, but I could. And one said to the other, that sort of pointed at me, and he said, that little guy sat by the wall, what do you think he's in prison for? What do you think he's in for? And the other guy kind of looked at me, and he said, oh, he looks brainy. He's got glasses. Looks like he's brain. Some kind of fraud. He did a big fraud. Did he do a big fraud? The other guy said, no. Oh, he's a dangerous little fucker. He's a dangerous little bastard. The other guy said, what did he do? He slashed a butcher to pieces. He cut a butcher right to pieces. Cut a butcher right up. And I had to kind of try and stop myself laughing that suddenly, where did that come from? That
Yeah,
I'd
yeah.
cut the butcher? Because obviously animal rights and that somebody that had kind of become some kind of rumor that I'd cut this butcher up. But I thought, well, I'll let them believe it, let them believe.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
one's gonna threaten me if they think I cut a butcher up. Let them just believe. I didn't,
Yeah, you
I
didn't
mean,
just
it's
tell
like
them the
that in jail. It is a real rumor factory because they're bored and these stories and yeah, it's like, yeah, it kind of
Well,
really.
they have one thing right that you don't look like someone who would punch back a bully. Like you look like you do surprise people, I think, you know? I think
Yeah,
that's what it
I mean,
is.
maybe so. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously that guy found it quite hard to believe that I, I'd slashed the butcher. Not that I had done, but there you go. But that's what yeah, that's what it's like. And there are. Yeah, it's not pleasant in jail, but there were some amusing things that happened that
Yeah,
are
yeah.
probably easier to laugh at now that I'm no longer in there. You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, but but there you go. But I think I was, regarding my situation in jail, as I said to Roger the other night, that I always thought about, well, and he did as well, that what we were going through was nothing compared to what the animals go through. So we didn't really have a right to feel depressed.
Yeah.
That would be selfish because, we were, I mean, our conditions in prison were probably better than a lot of humans, had,
Mhm.
in other parts of the world, where people are starving and being bombed and all that, and even at that time, we were probably better off than a very large number of humans, let alone other animals. So we didn't
Yeah.
feel we had the right to. You didn't make the best of it, really. You just have to make the best of it.
Yeah. Yeah, you are very able to keep things in perspective because it seems like you've always had the animals like very much at the forefront of your mind. And
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Right from the moment I found out what you know the enormity of, because when I found out about in that same magazine that I found out about veganism, there was also articles about vivisection. There was about the fur trade. So I didn't know about any of these things, and it was just horrific. I thought
yeah,
this is so much worse than I actually thought it was.
yeah,
You know, and I thought, right, that's it. That's my life now.
yeah.
I'm gonna do something about this. It's just like, but from that moment, I resolved. That's it. You
Well,
know.
you and I are similar in that because
Mm.
when I watched Earthlings, that's how I turned vegan.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just it was so much, like you said, it was just so
Mm.
much worse than I had ever even could have even
It's
conceived in
it,
my
it's
brain.
it's the conditions of existence on this planet. That conditions of
Yeah,
existence of one species is the most horrific tyrant over the others that you could possibly imagine.
yeah,
And yet, most members of that tyrant species are kind of oblivious to what's happening to the other
yeah,
animals, or shut it out, or don't want to know about it.
yeah,
That's the reality. And you pick up any newspaper or anything, it's as if none of that happens, as if none of
yeah.
that is going on.
I know it's
And yet
so
that is the
frustrating.
most, you know, and so, that's why I talk about, like, just like the Matrix, similar false reality, false consciousness. But once people realize and understand what's going on, then, that can be highly motivated in terms of, right, that's my life now. That's, you know,
Yeah,
I'm gonna, you know, not necessarily spend all my time doing that, but that's gonna be a really major thing that I'm gonna be involved in.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's been so great talking to you, Ronnie, and you're always welcome back on my channel anytime. It's not a big
Yeah.
channel, but yeah, but
Whenever you want me back, I'm very happy to speak to you, and I look forward to the. I mean, obviously, you're going to have to edit this and make it short.
I don't. I actually don't. I'm just gonna. I just throw it up, and it's like, you
Yeah,
know what?
what I tend to do, which I found has been quite successful when I share things, is what I'll do is I'll take a section of it or edit
Mhm.
out a section of it, and I'll put that on social media, and then I'll put a link to the whole thing, and then
Yeah,
I'll do that again and again, and I'll put, over a course of time, I'll put maybe 3, 4, 5 sections of it,
Yeah.
And I think that encourages more people to, because I think what some people do, they look how long a thing is. I think, oh, I'm not watching that. It's too long.
Right.
A
Yeah.
short thing they watch, and then they get a taste for it, and they think, oh, I will watch the whole thing. So
Yeah.
that's I think to
Yeah.
do that.
You got to
Yeah,
entice them in a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a little. It's like a little,
Yeah.
like a trailer sort of.
Yeah, I threw up a 3-hour interview with Andy Stepanian, and I was actually surprised that it didn't do that poorly. I think a lot of people, because we had a nice chemistry, we had a nice flow going. I feel like that's the main thing is like when there's a nice flow, then people can listen to it or watch it. But I mean, like you said, yeah, it's the question is, do they start it when they see that
They see how
305?
long it is, and they think. I mean, I'll listen, watch long things because what I tend to do is while I'm having my meals, I'll play it, and then over a
Yeah,
period of
yeah,
time, I watch the whole thing, even a lot something long.
right.
Even with books, I'll have my phone read books to me over,
Yeah,
and I'll
yeah,
read a whole book that way.
yeah,
Um, so it doesn't necessarily put me off, but I think a lot of people it probably does when they see, oh, this is 2 hours long. I can't be asked for that because
yeah.
everyone's used to these kind of short things, aren't they? These
They are,
days,
they are.
so
We have a
that's how it
real
is. So I'll
short
probably do that with your one. So if you
mm,
see on my Facebook, you'll probably see that I've taken a section and then in the text I've directed people to the whole thing.
yeah, yeah. Which, by the way, this is yours just as much as mine. So feel free to do whatever
Yeah,
you
yeah,
want with
that's
the
what I do.
interview.
But I,
Yeah,
obviously want people to watch the whole thing.
right, right.
But
Yeah,
I find that's a kind of probably the best way of getting them to do it.
yeah, yeah. I think so. Um, all right. Well, yeah, it's been so great. And there, like, honestly, there were so many moments in that book. What I was doing, I just kept taking screenshots of the parts that I was
Yeah,
at.
yeah.
And we could honestly talk for 4 more hours,
There's
just
loads.
going
There's
through all
loads
the
of stuff in
stories.
there. It's a very
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff chronicled. It's like a chronicle of lots of different things, isn't it?
it is.
One
Yeah,
thing after another. That book, and he's got an awful lot. He's put an awful lot in there.
he
I mean,
did. He did.
I mean, we did it over Skype actually,
Oh, really?
and we spoke every Sunday for about 6 months, and then
Mm,
John would write something from that and send it to me, and I'd edit it, or if he got something a little bit wrong, I'd change it,
yeah.
and that's
Mhm.
how he did it.
Yeah.
All over that in just over that. Yeah, about 6 months every Sunday. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's
we're doing
great.
that.
It's
Yeah.
like a chronological, yeah, like you said, kind of just
It is. It's very. Yeah. It covers. It covers everything. In really quite an ordered way.
right, right.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, yeah, it's good. And I think John's done some other books since then. I think he wrote one about Ingrid Newkirk or something
Oh,
that
did he? Interesting.
without
Okay.
her permission, I think.
Oh.
He just did it anyway. I think he's done some. That was the first one. The only problem with it was that the publisher, because the first time John had written a book,
Mm,
he'd done lots of articles, and he's a journalist, and that's how I knew him through. He had a website that I wrote some articles for, and or he published some articles on his website. And but what he did was he chose like a kind of publisher that specialised in providing books for universities, so they go on low volume, high price. So
mm,
that meant that the cover price was a lot higher, really. Than I mean, it's
mhm.
something like it started off at $36, I think, in the USA,
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty
which
steep.
is
I
like
got it
a
electronically, but
huge
it's a
amount
little
for it. I mean, the sort of ebook is less, it's a lot less,
mhm, mhm,
and but the actual yeah, the actual printed version, and I had a friend that used to do stalls at vegan festivals,
mhm,
selling lots of sort of vegan related stuff, and he managed to get a deal and get some of the books imported, and he managed to sell them for about £22 each,
mhm,
because originally it was selling at £36 over here, which is like
mm.
$36 is less than that, but because of the import and all that, and so he
Yeah,
managed to sell it. But even so, that was probably twice as much as what it really for a book that size, what it should have been. But he did it without really making any profit. He just to get it as cheap to sell it, to get people
Right,
reading
right.
it.
Yeah.
But yes, I think it's still available. I think you can still get it around about that price from some places here, but it's still expensive, and I think it's a shame really that it's costs people so much to read.
Yeah, it is
Quite a
too
thin book.
bad. But I
Yeah,
would say, this the kind of book that would be very inspiring just to see someone, like you said, kind of do it yourself kind of thing. So I would
yeah,
recommend the book, and even with the sticker price,
yeah,
especially for
yeah,
people who are looking for a spark, like a spark of inspiration.
yeah. I think my main message is do it yourself. Don't wait
Yeah,
round to be told what to do.
yeah,
Um, it's easy to do, yeah, and sort of really simple things can be very effective that don't take an awful lot of like organizing. You can start in that way, you know,
yeah,
and that's what we so desperately need. We so desperately need that autonomy to come back.
yeah,
It's like it's like I think the most important thing that the movement can learn from the ALF was the autonomous nature of how the ALF operated autonomously, and people doing things through their own initiative.
yeah,
That is really, although the ALF, you know, is no longer active in any way as near the way it was. I think probably the most important legacy that it's left for the movement is the importance of autonomous action
yeah.
and the importance of people acting on their own initiative. And if that can be applied to the type of action that's possible for us to do today, we could be really flying.
Yeah, we could,
Yeah.
especially as many people as you mentioned who got inspired by that action back in the day, and how you've seen this sort of resurgence of anti-vivisection. You've seen this
Yeah,
sort
yeah,
of like
yeah. And and
using
and and
ebbs
and
and
I
flows.
I I'm very much hoping the next lot of figures will show a further decrease,
For the
because
decline.
that's how you measure success. And it's kind of quite hard to get that across to people because they're so focused on, we want to close this place down, and why isn't this place closed, and why is it still open, and we're out here shouting all the time and all that. And I say, but look, you kind of, the real success is something else, and despite the fact this place hasn't closed, you may well still be being successful. Those figures are going down. You're making a difference, even though nowhere's closed. And so don't beat yourself up because you are making a difference. That's
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
that's what I'd say to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, thank you so much, Ronnie. So like I said, we'll put some of those links down below. But everybody, like Ronnie Lee, like it's so great to meet you and talk to you. It's such a like on it, like I don't mean to put everybody on a pedestal, but it's such an honor. That's like an honor of a lifetime to meet you and talk to you.
Well, I mean, it's been a pleasure, but I mean, I think, as I said, I think everyone that does what they can towards
Mhm.
animal liberation is a hero, because
Yeah.
no one person can achieve it. This is the thing. It's got to be like this massive effort of lots of people.
Well,
So,
why
you
didn't
know,
you do it? Come on, Ronnie. You could have done it. You should have done it. No, I'm
yeah,
just
yeah, I
kidding.
know. I know. Yeah, but it's been great having a chat. And if you
Yeah.
want to, if something comes up and you want to chat to me about anything else, just drop me a message and we'll arrange it.
Sounds great. Sounds
Brilliant.
great.
Great.
All right.
Well, great
All
to
right.
meet you,
Take care,
Jeremy,
Ron.
and I'm
You
sure
too.
we'll get together again soon.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
sounds good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.